All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Sebastopol Planning Commission, a special meeting of October 27th, 2020. Let me just read that second here. This meeting complies with Sonoma County Health Officer's COVID-19 order to shelter in place issued on March 17th, 2020, and pursuant to California Governor Newsom's Executive Order N-29-20 issued on March 17, 2020. Please, Director, call the order roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair Fernandez. We'll do the roll call. Chair Fernandez.
Here.
Vice Chair Fritz.
Here.
Commissioner Wilson. And I believe he is logging on with a different, so I'll move on and come back. Commissioner Dauch.
Here.
Commissioner Ottinger. I do not see her present. Commissioner Kelly.
Here.
Commissioner Howard. Kate, are you there? All right, since I see her on the screen, we'll come back to her. Commissioner Lindenbush?
Here.
Commissioner Wilson?
Here.
And Commissioner Howard? Okay, let's see if she's able to join us with audio. So right now we just have Commissioner Ottinger absent.
Okay, we definitely have a quorum. Okay, so at this point, like item number 3 on the agenda, comments from the public on items not on the agenda. You can either raise your hand figuratively or literally, and Director Swanstrom will recognize you.
Thank you, Chair Fernandez. Until now, we have not received any comments for items not on the agenda in the intervening since we have posted the agenda. And I do not see, we have one member of the public, Sarah Camnasio. I'll unmute you for just a moment just to see if you have any questions or comments not on the agenda.
I don't have any, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're good to proceed.
Okay, moving on to item number 4, statements of conflict of interest. Does any of the commissioners have any conflicts of interest they need to bring forth? Okay, assuming none. Okay, move on to item number 5, discussion, Ives Park improvement maintenance discussion. And Carrie, I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you. And I want to give a thank you to Commissioner Howe for putting forth this agenda item and helping to coordinate it. We had several of the commissioners do walking tours and submit comments. Those are included in your packet. We also had a couple of suggestions that the 2017 improvements and suggestions from the 2017 tour and maintenance discussion be included, which is also in your packet. We also have Dante Del Prete, the Public Works Superintendent. He is in charge of the parks maintenance as well as facilities for the city. He was here in 2017 when the prior discussion was held with the commission. I was not, so I do want to hand it off to him to say, give a little bit of background on park maintenance as well as some of the things that have been achieved that were in the 2017 discussion.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for having me, commissioners. I appreciate being able to give what I wanted to do is give a brief overview of park maintenance and kind of in a whole to get everybody's kind of on the same page. And then I will touch base on some Ives specific items. I was here in 2017. I've actually been here since 1996. So I have a little bit of history going on 25 years with the city and almost 7 prior with City of Novato. So So brief parks overview. I'll touch on all the parks kind of briefly, just get everybody's head wrapped around kind of the maintenance perspective of what we have to deal with, what we try and accomplish, how we try and address concerns and complaints, and ideas for moving forward and making improvements. So I have a dedicated staff to parks, or I should say landscaping and building maintenance, of about 3.5 people. I know it sounds weird, half, but one person we pull for quite a bit of other items. He's a technically savvy person, so we take advantage of his skill set. So those essentially 4 park staff take care of parks, the street landscape maintenance, open space, pool. They are also set up to do building maintenance, all the landscaping, restrooms, garbage, debris removal, street trees, and all the parking lots. So that's 3.5 people. And with COVID, we've had, an interesting challenge on being able to maintain safety and still get some work done. The main topic tonight is Ives Park, so I'll start with that. Ives Park is an old park. That's why we have a very large, very large plan for it in the future, which I would love to see in my career. Unfortunately, financially, I'm hoping to get as much of it done while I'm still here. Some of the key things with Ives Park is we have to realize that it normally, in a normal year, not COVID, it does house the Apple Blossom Festival and the Peacetown concert. So it's a heavily used park, and when it's not being used for those big events, it's also being used for other special events, large parties, birthdays, retirements, any other special event. We have Willard Libby Park, which we installed a recent play structure in, which was a huge task. And now that it's open, is being enjoyed by several people of the public safely, as safe as we can make it. They have to follow the rules. Laguna Youth Park, some of the issues with Laguna Youth Park is there's no public restrooms when the baseball fields aren't open. We did install new tables and facilities at that park recently. I think just completing the last table this month. Tamagotchi Park is an open space park. As we know, it goes under flooding conditions. When we have that, there are some vernal pools and some wildlife surveys that we need to be very conscious of before we provide any maintenance out there. Then there's Laguna Preserve, which is a kind of a vast open area, tons of wildlife, environmental beauty. It also has the floating bridge. It's a public works maintenance. It's a big project to take that bridge in and out. One thing that not a lot of people are in tune with is the Luther Burbank Experimental Farm. We actually got a new curator this year who's very motivated and interested and brought a lot of things to our attention. Unfortunately, a lot of those things that got brought to our attention are very expensive tree work. So that's a complication this year, but something that needs to be addressed. Skate Garden Park, skate park and the park next to it. The new park is great. It kind of is underutilized due to kind of the use and character of the individuals that use the skate park from time to time. I will say that the skate park is a great asset to the community, especially in the morning when we see those younger kids out there, and it's really neat to see the parents teaching their kids how to skateboard. So it is a great asset. Unfortunately, it does have the vandalism aspect to it. The Railroad Forest that a lot of people aren't aware of is another natural area that we have to do a lot of homeless camp removals, vegetation management, maintain the paths. And then the Mario Salvio Plaza, which is also considered a park. Some people think it's a parking lot or a street. Farmers market. We have a lot of homeless issues in the restrooms. And that seems to be the focus of our mistletoe infestation. I get a ton of complaints about the plaza mistletoe. And unfortunately, tree health around asphalt lends to mistletoe infestations easily taking place in those trees that don't have a lot of natural soil around them. The Redota Trail is also an area that we're responsible for, which is from Johnson to Main Street section, so behind the football field at the high school. Olive Ives Pool, and it's maintenance intensive because it is an aging facility. The Youth Annex Labyrinth is an area that we maintain. We kind of don't maintain the labyrinth as much as it's supposed to be adopted and maintained by some of the community center staff, but over the years we've kind of tried to collaboratively keep that in place and keep that as an asset to the community. And another area is the theater lawn where the Peace Wall is. We maintain that as well. And a lot of people just tie that in with the plaza. And again, all the landscaping around the government buildings, the library, police station, not much at Public Works. One other item I'd like to touch on is I did recently, just earlier this month, receive a grant for the value of about $33,000. And the reason I bring this up is because I know some of the items that were mentioned in the 2017 report talked about replacing garbage cans. So this was a zero waste grant that I received, and that is for the replacement of recycle/garbage cans, and they're the black metal ones, similar to the ones we've been replacing downtown and Main Street. And I also got a grant which not only helps with zero waste, it also helps with homeless advocacy. I got a grant for 2 water bottle filling station drinking fountains, similar to the one in the plaza, if you've seen that one. So I do know several homeless advocates are very fond of those. So they offer an easy way for homeless people to fill up a clean water source, reliable water source. Some of the upcoming projects that you guys are well aware of because you've looked at the ADA plans for Ives. That includes removal of the asphalt, which was one of the items identified. One item I did actually kind of get notice on today to come to fruition is the Brookhaven tennis courts are scheduled to be resurfaced. I did work with the collaborative effort with Brookhaven School, and we are actually going to be adding pickleball striping to those tennis courts. So some tennis only advocates may not be fond of it, but it does add a whole nother element to an activity that is popular, and we simply don't have those resources here in town. So I think it's going to be a great asset to be able to add a whole new activity to one of our amenities for the park. And then I already mentioned the Burbank Experiment Farm is, I'm working through the tree issues there, trying to address imminent hazards based on maintenance or mitigation. So that's a big ticket item that I was not aware of that is going to be a significant budget issue. I did take some time to go through the maintenance list of items from the 2017 report. So, Carrie, I'm not sure, do you want me to touch on all those briefly and just continue on? Or how would you want to go to question answer? How would you guys like to do this?
Hi, Dante, by the way, thank you for being here.
Would you like me to continue on through?
Yeah, go ahead and continue.
Okay, and
yeah.
Okay, so I focused on the maintenance, of course, because I'm in charge of maintenance. But I'll just go down the line. Provide additional funding for wood chips. I do have $6,000 this year and last year for that. The remove dead branches on the trees and perform appropriate pruning. Honestly, I wish I could perform the appropriate pruning because most of those trees identified in 2017 we lost in a bad winter. Several of you probably remember we lost some significantly large established oak trees, which was really a detriment to the park because the best part of Ives Park was the significant matured trees. Luckily, we still have some in there, and we have done a significant replanting with native trees. We did valley oaks, big leaf sycamore, California sycamores and big leaf maples. So, and that was under recommendation. And I did touch base with Carrie Bush on that. So the light poles, or the next one is the lawn drainage. We did fill and regrade that area, so drainage right there by the ADA path that was originally created a few years ago has been addressed. Maybe not completely, but it's much better. We did not paint the light poles yet, but we did. I had to choose there, and I chose to make sure we got the LED fixtures in place first. Not only because it improved the lighting and the safety of the park and usability in those dusk and morning hours, but it also is an energy conserving measure. So the height of the jewel willow hedge, we generally do like to keep it at 4.5 feet, but it's 4.5 feet from the high side, you know, so when you're in the park, it does look taller selfishly, and we kind of keep it at that length because ergonomically it's easier for my staff to maintain it there. And it doesn't totally close in the park, but gives it that nice barrier. So the Veterans Building and the play area hedge has been completely removed. That's completed. We do need to focus a little bit more. We're going to clean up that ivy section and the oak tree as the hill starts to climb towards Willow. But we did complete that as well. We installed bollards, I think in 2018 or 27, right after this thing came through. We did install a bollard on the Ives side, which was the issue. Vehicles can still, my maintenance vehicles still enter the park from the Veterans Building or Art Center side. And we did do some fencing repairs, and we recognize that more is needed. So that would be an item I'm sure we're going to discuss this evening, because how much do we want to spend on fencing repairs if eventually the goal is to remove most of it. We did repair the steps of the wooden stage, although I walked it today and I think the ones we repaired in 17 could use a little more work. The thing that's important to remember about that stage is that the Shakespeare Festival actually built that stage with volunteers. And then Peacetown has made modifications to it. So right now it kind of looks like it's in disrepair because there's been some vandalism to some boards that were installed in the front from Peacetown. And I could probably get with Jim and have him repair that with the same type of material. I did touch base on the recycle and trash cans. We're looking to replace all of those with one standard black metal structure where the lids will be clearly painted blue for recycle. The pathways and paving should be addressed in the ADA project, or a big part of it. The one pathways that we need to look at addressing in the future are the small ones that are up in behind the stage. But I think we're focusing, as you know, on the ADA pathways that'll get people with, you know, compromised abilities to be able to move easily to the ADA accessible picnic area. And it'll take away a lot of the tripping hazards when we get the Peacetown concerts back, which was really my main goal, is to try and get rid of the hazardous walkways. The sculptures that were up have been removed, and the sculpture garden is coming downstream, so the art element will be there, and that'll be a huge improvement. We are looking at improving maintenance in that area as well. In this year's budget, the restroom doors at Ives were a big ticket item because of vandalism. Now, unfortunately, we're having vandalism. They found out that some of the wood around the doors is rotten, so they're kicking in the plywood sides. So some of the Ives maintenance issues. So one thing that Kenyon touched on in 17 was, you know, we're always interested in, and Public Works as well is interested in creating new and exciting parks and open space for the public. Unfortunately, we have to realize that maintenance is always going to be an issue because maintenance isn't exciting. You know, building things is great. We love to build things. We love to add amenities for the public. But unfortunately, with those new facilities don't come endowments to budget maintenance. And in our current climate, I don't see any more staff. I hope I can keep the staff I have through this economic challenge. And I hope to keep them full time. So That being said, we did receive some grant funding recently, which is the first in my career that actually will fund maintenance. So you can imagine I'm excited about that. And then I know there's some excitement about looking for volunteer opportunities. So volunteer opportunities are encouraged and great, although they have to be realistic and attainable. And in general, those are better suited for a one-day project. You know, dumping off mulch in a newly planted area and getting a kind of a team effort of the community out to spread the mulch, kind of build community, build, you know, value in the project. So those are the type of projects I like for volunteer work. And we also have the Adopt a Landscape program, which isn't only for street maintenance areas, but we do have areas that have been adopted by individuals and businesses that I myself haven't had a chance to really get out there in the public more. I could work with Holly, probably our outreach coordinator, to try and get the Adopt a Landscape program out there more. But generally those are smaller areas, kind of confined, where one or two people can handle maintenance on those. So with that being said, I hope I didn't go on too long. I just wanted to kind of give an overview and talk about Ives. I would definitely open up to any conversation, questions, or any ideas for the future.
Okay. Thank you, Dante. Is that all you guys do? It sounds like you have a lot of spare time in your hands.
Yeah, today when I was trying to put together some notes, we had a little minor sewer overflow, so I kind of had to scribble some things down and run out the door to take care of that. So.
Well, appreciate you being here. Thank you. So I think what I'd like to do is open it up just for some questions on some of the items that Dante spoke about, and then my plan was open it up for public comment, and then bring it back, and we can get a little bit more in depth talking about some of the items and maybe prioritization and so forth. Hopefully we'll have time for that. So be thinking, if you have questions, I'm just going to go down the line here. Vice Chair Fritz, any questions or clarifications?
No, not really at this time. Thanks for the update, Dante.
Okay. Commissioner Wilson, any questions for Dante right now?
No, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Dauch.
No questions at the moment, but it's nice to see the list diminishing, or at least the maintenance.
Commissioner Ottinger. Don't know if she's with us.
She is not with us yet.
Okay. Commissioner Kelly.
Yes, I don't know if this is the right time to ask this question about the ball field and a little bit of the history of uses.
Yeah, I think we could. You could, if he wants to elaborate on that, and then we can come back to it.
I can elaborate on what I know. The ball field does have a lease. Little League does lease the ball field. I know there was questions, concerns, and maybe some wanting of opening up that fence to open up the park. Of course, Little League, unfortunately, changes their leadership group as the kids go through quickly, some quicker than others. So the board changes. Right now, they don't have, of course, with COVID, they don't have a lot of leadership there right now. So I'm doing my best for addressing maintenance through Little League. As far as the use generally is allowed through Little League. So one instance, Apple Blossom, Public Works would roll back the fence so the Apple Blossom Festival could utilize the outfield for part of their event. Unfortunately, one year it rained very heavy and the outfield got severely damaged, which then Little League shied away from wanting to grant that use, at least for vehicle access. So there's been modified use back and forth, but generally Little League pays for all the maintenance within the fence. So they kind of, I wouldn't say dictate, but have the right to decide what activities go on their field. The city can definitely get involved and make some recommendations, but in the past, historically, it's been an agreement through Little League.
So this is to the chair. Are we going to have Dante available for further questions when we get to the item of, different parts of the park?
Yes, I think right after public comment, we can kind of go into that information.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Howell?
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Dante, for that report. It was very informative. I think I can save my questions to the point of the discussion where we maybe go through specific items, because my questions are towards specific items. So I will wait until we get to that part of the discussion. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Commissioner Lindenbush?
Thank you, Superintendent Del Prete and Chair Fernandez. I'll hold my questions.
Okay. Dante, I just have one question on you mentioned the bathrooms at the youth park. Is that, are they just closed when there's nothing going on? Whose decision is that? And is it day and night that they're closed, or only when games are there, or how's that set up?
They are included as part of the Little League lease, and they're part of the baseball field. It's included in the concession stand, or the snack shack, whatever you want to call it. It's part of the concession stand. And they were flooded significantly, about 6 feet high, probably, maybe, close. And Little League did coordinate and facilitate all the repairs. So they do maintain and kind of take on ownership of that facility. This has been a topic for a long time. It's called a youth park, but we don't have facilities for youth to use it. So on the same conversation as the wants and needs for a restroom up at Burbank Experimental Farm, I would also love to see a restroom built for Laguna Youth Park. The one that's in place now can't be used because it would have to be completely demolished, and because it's not ADA accessible and wouldn't be able to accommodate it. Even if I looked at turning it into a single restroom rather than two separate ones, and still it would be too hard to accommodate ADA for that particular facility.
Okay. Actually, I have another question that kind of has to do with our agenda for our next meeting, which is regarding hazard mitigation. And I just wanted to bring up, and we can discuss it during the discussion time, but I just was wondering if, say, Ice Park or any of the other parks, any thought has been given to protection or any fire issues or any kind of that kind of stuff, and just maybe something you can think about, and we can come back to that unless you have a quick comment now.
The one thing we do for hazard mitigation for, of course, right now it's October, winds, fire. We do get ahead of making sure we clean the gutters so they're not full of dry leaves. And that's something we keep in mind. And we do that periodically throughout the year, but we do start that early because for the buildings and facilities, if there are sparks that fly around, even in a park that has normal irrigation, those dry leaves and those gutters would be quick to start a building on fire. As far as any sort of mitigation for fire hazard within the parks, again, most of them have irrigation. The trees are normally spaced far enough apart to where, generally they wouldn't jump from tree to tree. So really our mitigation efforts for fire hazard would be just cleaning those gutters because all of our parks are irrigated. As far as the Laguna Preserve, of course, we have had fires out there. We've had homeless encampment fires kind of take hold a few times. The fire department's been excellent about getting out there. There are some access issues. After we get the first substantial rain, we can't get a vehicle past the one section. If you go from the east, or the Chevron station side is what we call it, unfortunately, the gate by the Chevron station. We have vehicle access once the area is dry, but there's that bridge that goes through the wetlands, the pedestrian bridge, that once we get a substantial rain, we can't get a vehicle through there. And that's the whole reason why we need to pull out the floating bridge so soon, is because any substantial rain and that bridge is stuck out there, because that's the access we have to get it out. So the fire department has been great. We do have a four-wheeler and a small trailer that will go across the floating bridge when it's in, to provide emergency rescue and or maintenance if we had to get through that direction. We do have that at the public works yard.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. That'll help. Okay, at this point, I'd like to open it up for public comment. Director Swanstrom, I'll let you take over for that.
Thank you. So if you do have a public comment or a question that you want to ask, a couple of different things. You can, if you have a video on, you can just, raise your hand, or you can use the chat or the raise your hand function within the Zoom system.
Okay. Anyone
All
wanting to
right,
make?
I did not see any public comments. So,
Wait,
okay, thank you. So, Mr. Diedler, I am unmuting you. You have 3 minutes, I believe. Can you see the timer on the screen?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Dante a question, or the commission, but recently the hedge between the arts building and the kids play area was removed. And that is kind of like a historic attraction in the park. You can walk by that hedge and see how the branches are polished by generations of kids that have been playing in there, playing hide and seek and different kind of climbing games, going through those plants that are, my kids played in them, my grandkids played in them. And when I've been out in the park, you see other kids playing in them, and now they're gone. I'm sure it had something to do with security, but what is the balance of stripping all the exterior away from the park and keeping it like a park?
We'll answer those questions afterwards. We can't really engage at this point. But you still have a couple minutes if you have any other questions, Lynn.
Not questions, I just have statements.
Go ahead.
Okay. I sent a letter saying that there's fundamental problems with the current plan. And, the most significant one is moving the kids' play area to next to a busy street where there's limited parking and away from the bathrooms and no shade. And it's something totally overlooked. And the community in general thinks the current play area in those aspects is great. And so when you move it back, it shifts a lot of other things. And I think that's an essential thing to be worked out. One of the things that it shifts is they're undergrounding a portion of the creek that is sort of between there and the stage for reasons that aren't clear, but I think in the long-term planning of what you're going to do, those issues should be resolved. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Lynn. Is there any other member of the public who'd like to make any comments or have questions?
All right, I do not see any, Chair Fernandez.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and close the public comment. And Dante, if you just want to address those comments and questions, and then we can kind of continue from there.
I can address Lynn's. Lynn's, good to see you again. I haven't seen you for a while. As far as the hedge, like I said, I've been here for 25 years. I remember when that cedar hedge, our cypress hedge went all the way around the park. And yeah, a lot of kids did play in it. We did get a lot of dieback in there, old wood. It's the cypress is supposed to be a tree, and it's really not something that's supposed to be hedged back. So over time, that wood did get infested and decay, and we had sections die out. There was concern. I can even concerned with fire hazard and security issues, and kind of, I don't want to use the word attractive nuisance, because it was an attractive hedge. I would agree with Lynn on that, in some aspects, because the kids did go in there and play. Unfortunately, trees aren't really intended to be a play structure in a city park. So we did have bottles and, you know, other types of things that were an issue within that area. And at the time, I remember in 2017, early in 2017 with Kenyon, the request was to finish removing that hedge, to open it up, have it feel more safety and not hidden, have it be included to where the art center and the park kind of melded into one property, and try and make it more inclusive of a community area. So events at the art center could bleed into the park and vice versa. So yes, Lynn, I do absolutely remember kids playing in there, and I know kids had a lot of fun in that hedge. We did replace 90% of it several years ago, and this was the last section that we removed recently.
And regarding, I guess, moving to the bathrooms, that's kind of part of the master plan. We're not quite there yet. Point well taken on that. So in the time we have remaining, I want to make sure we get an opportunity to discuss some of the priorities. Dante already talked about some of the items that we had mentioned when we did our walkthrough that's being addressed or being taken care of. But there may be other areas on there. So I think we can just kind of open it up for commissioners. If you want to make a comment, if you have priorities you think would be items to consider, and kind of take it from there. We can go in order, or if you just want to wave your hand and Carrie, you can identify, or would you rather me just go down the list?
If someone wants to start, I think that is always nice.
Okay. Vice Chair Fritz, you want to get us going?
Sure. I guess, you know, my big thing with, you know, when I walk through Ives Park, it was a couple things. I mean, it just looks, you know, a bit ragged. And I think a large part of the raggedness is the asphalt. The asphalt is largely in pretty poor condition, and there's a lot of it. And, you know, the plan that was brought to us, was that last month or a couple months ago, we looked at the proposed reconfiguration of some of the pathways and redoing the asphalt. I'm in favor of that, because I really think that the current condition of the asphalt is just not acceptable. So if there is a plan for that and budget for that, I actually am in favor of taking care of that, because I think it will help, you know, create, it will just look better, you know, even if it's just asphalt and not something, a nicer material. I just think newer asphalt is going to look so much better and function so much better. It gets rid of the tripping hazards. It will be accessible and all that stuff. So I'm in favor of that. And also, you know, the chain link fence is horrible, and we all know the chain link fence is horrible. And I hear what you say, Dante, about, you know, how much do we spend fixing the fence versus, you know, since we eventually want to get rid of it, but parts of it look really bad. And I guess, you know, I would be in favor of still kind of repairing where we can, because I think it's going to be a long time before that fence really does go away. Unless, you know, we get some kind of grant that lets us, you know, spend a bunch of money on fencing, because there's just so much fencing in Ives Park that it would be nice to see at least what's there be in somewhat decent condition. And then the thing that I always will rant about, and I will try to keep my rant short, is allowing access to that nice grassy area next to the creek. You know, it's just so tempting. You're looking at over the chain link fence at this nice, perfect little picnic area next to the creek, but you can't go there. And I know it's been explained to me reasons why we can't do that, but I, for the life of me, still don't really understand why. I mean, there's bodies of water and parks all over the country that people can go have picnics next to. I'm not sure why you know, this area is considered so hazardous, we can't let people in there. So I would love to see that changed. I appreciate the picnic table replacement I see has been, some of those older picnic tables seem to be going away, and we're getting the new plastic and metal ones, and benches. I think that's good. I'm looking forward to seeing the trash cans being replaced, because there's some trash cans that are in pretty sad shape. But I guess that's kind of my initial take on some of the priorities I see for the coming couple of years for maintenance issues.
You're muted.
Linda, are you, looks like you're starting to talk.
Oh, was I called on?
I don't think you
Okay.
were, but you're highlighted in the Zoom screen, so I thought you were jumping in.
Ever, I think you are calling on people, but you're muted, so we're not hearing you.
Thank you. Yeah, Linda, go ahead.
I didn't have a whole lot. I appreciate all of the comments forwarded on, and just following up around the ball field and wondering if it's a multi-use. Does the proprietors allow other kinds of sports there, or what in terms of appropriate for that size of the area, and is it going to be just too much discord to try and open that up entirely and relocate that use maybe over by the community center? And I don't know if Dante's still here.
Yeah, he's here. I think we're just going to kind of go through each commissioner's points just because of the time, and then we can come back to that. And I think we could even continue some of this discussion into another meeting down the road. So,
Okay.
Okay. Commissioner Wilson, did you have any?
Yes, thank you. Well, I agree with Commissioner Fritz, and regarding the ball field, Carrie had sent me the agreement a while back, and maybe she could circulate it to the rest of the commission at some point. It's not really a lease; it's just a short-term agreement that can be terminated by either side on very short notice. The Little League doesn't pay anything to the city for it, and as I recall, that agreement says that the Little League is supposed to allow other people to use the area when the Little League isn't using it. And the master plan consultant from 5 years ago in that report noted that it was locked, and in all the years I've seen the field, it's always been locked, and that's contrary to the agreement with the city. Although the consultant in his report said that he had talked to someone at the city, and they, it was unclear, if the city had embraced that despite what the agreement says. And I also agree with what Commissioner Kelly said, is that, and I've made this point before, and I won't keep repeating it, but we have at least 3 other ball fields in town, 2 near the community center, 1 at Regal. In addition, there are ball fields at the schools that can be used under the Civic Center Act. And so it's not like this is the only field. And it seems like I think it would be useful at some point to get someone from the Little League to come before the commission and tell us what's going on and what their plans are, and can they use other facilities? How often do they use the Little League field? That kind of thing. Because if you look at the usable area of the park, the ball field comprises a significant portion of the usable area, and it's walled off. And I have said before, and I still think that ought to be looked at. So those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Dausch?
Yes, thank you. So yeah, I think I agree with Commissioner Fritz and many of the suggestions. I think the priorities for maintenance at this point really are asphalt, repairing where we can. I think removing some of it may be an easier fix, certainly in the Rose Garden, and there's some areas where it's so degraded, it might as well be taken out and some topsoil put in. And I think there's several areas that could happen, or even just cut it back to increase the planting areas would be a fairly inexpensive maintenance type item, and is one of the few items that really hasn't been significantly worked on since the last time we looked at this in 2017. That said, I see so many of the things we talked about then have, so that's great to see. I think in addition, with the ball fields, there was quite a lot of discussion in 2017 about the issue of usage, but also the issue of visual obstruction. And there was talk about trying to remove some of the signage on the south side of the ball field, so you could at least get the visual look into the ball field, which has some is attractive. It has some, I don't know for want of a better word, there's something nice about looking into that field. The signage could be moved to the north fence fairly easily, and so it could still be a revenue source for Little League. And of course, having that unlocked, I think, would be a great thing. And I do remember the discussion about the damage that had happened and the difficulty that had caused the Little League. And then, of course, the other big issue, as Paul pointed out, is the fencing. And I was, when we had a hearing in 2017, on my list of priorities was replacing sections of the chain link with perhaps a black chain link, which are much less visually obtrusive. There wasn't a lot of agreement, and I understand why, because the attitude was a chain link fence is a chain link fence. That said, we're 3 years later, it's not gotten any better, obviously. What would be lovely is to replace it with some combination of a post and rail fence, maybe with a chain link behind it, so it's visually appealing. That's something that if we did then end up removing the fencing, it could be reused elsewhere. So I thought, as I was walking in there recently, that was where my mind went. If we could even just replace and or dress up that with post and rail and chain link combination if necessary, to create the barrier that's needed, I think that would be a huge improvement. And once we get past those items, we're into the improvements that we listed in 2017, which I think still stand up in the priority list that we had back then. I think is still very relevant. So I won't get into that, but I think that stays relevant for improvements.
Okay. Thank you. And you're right, the grass is greener on the other side. So.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Haug.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you to all the commissioners for going to the park and kind of revisiting these lists. And I appreciate that since I kind of initiated that. From my experience of being in the park, making the list, reading the staff report from 2017 and listening to Dante's report, a couple of things come to mind. Also, given the extremely limited resources that we have currently available to us. So one of the ideas that I think is important is ways that we can work in tandem with maintenance to kind of get as much bang for the buck as we can get. So for instance, we're having, it would be nice to come back once the asphalt plan is completed by the consultants that are preparing to do the work, to look at it and make sure that it kind of reflects our discussion this evening, maybe with Commissioner Douch's, comments about just removing some of the asphalt. And I was also, when I was in the park, I was looking at this stage area to the west of Ives Pool, and I was thinking it would be really lovely if there's a way that we could define that area more as a town square type area. And in my proposal, I sent a link to the architects that did the Noe Valley 10 Square. And it seems like if we're removing the asphalt and redoing the area, we might be able just to simply define that more as a square with some simple pavers. And so I was just wondering if it's, possible to try to think of ways that if you're already ripping something up and laying something else down, if you can kind of create a more maximum user benefit from that. I also really agree about the fencing. I would love to get a price for how much it would be. And especially around the children's playground, you know, there's just a way that a chain link fence around a playground just seems kind of arcane and, you know, more like a, I don't know, just reminds me of a prison. And I would also like to see the playground open up to that grassy field, you know, so even if we could just remove the chain link fence and create a more visual opening to the grassy field that's adjacent to the children's playground, because I've never seen children in the grassy field, but in my whole life as a parent and going to tons of parks, usually if you have a play structure in a field, the kids go back and forth from it. And so, and when I was walking, I saw a lot of use of the park by families. So I was wondering if there's more play structure opportunities, possibly in the park. I know we have limited time tonight, but I'm hoping that if we're able to continue this, that we could develop a survey for the public to take maybe in January or February about how they use Ives Park and what small improvements would be enhance their user experience. I also feel like the bathrooms could be upgraded, possibly. You know, I think Chair Fernandez noted that there's some holes in the side of the building, which I assume is some form of vandalism. So if there's a way that we can keep upgrading the bathrooms, I know it's probably hard to maintain them because it seems like they get a lot of use, but looking into that as another small, hopefully affordable improvement. And I feel in this discussion, what I'm hearing about the ball field is that the Little League is kind of taking on some of the maintenance and care of the ball fields. And because of our limited resources and limited staffing, that might come, you know, that might be a benefit to the maintenance department. So I'm wondering if there is community interest to use that field, if people who are interested in using it are also interested in helping to maintain it. You know, maybe there's a way to facilitate partnerships. So it's, you know, so if people are using it, they're also contributing to its maintenance and not just leaving it to the Little League to be responsible for maintenance. And the last thing about the creek is I've seen several children just climb over the fence when I've been in Ives Park. And the other question I have about that is, you know, we have the Laguna where there's water and there's no fencing around it. We obviously live close to the Pacific Ocean and there's no fence around the ocean. And so it just seems, you know, I'm sure there is a liability issue, but you know, given where we live and there's like many different bodies of water all around us that are much larger and much more threatening in some way if you can't swim, that, yeah, it just seems like we should be able to rethink that kind of, you know, fencing, and maybe it's a bit of overkill, I don't know, but I just really feel like the fence is a huge deterrent. And my last comment is that on the master plan, they have the removal of the hedge along Jewel. And I also agree that I would kind of like more visibility. When I go to Willard Libby Park, I like the way it's so open and you can really see through to the, you know, the whole kind of park. You know, it's a good visual connectedness. So I'm just wondering about that. And then my final comment is that I do feel like we can put in a crosswalk at Jewel and Willow, but I know that that we need to talk to the traffic person about the crosswalk. So I will save that for another time.
Okay, thank you. Carrie, we're gonna run a little bit late. Is that okay? I want to give Commissioner Lindbush a chance to make his comments.
Yes, I think we've got a few people in the waiting room, but they are, I've let them know that the next meeting is, they're here for the next
Okay.
item, and I've let them know.
And then we continue this meeting then? Is that the,
Yes, yeah.
okay, all right. Go ahead, Luke.
Thank you. In interest of time and just for the public to be able to go to the next meeting, which is also very important, I'll keep it very brief. I and especially since we're continuing, which I think is great. I just want to thank all the commissioners for their really thoughtful comments. I did a walking tour as well. Definitely a handful of points to bring up about maintenance that I would love to bring up at the next meeting. I would just continue to advocate the prioritization of 25 and 27, which center around that corner at Willow and Jewel, and as has been noted, has a lot of different opportunities, I think, for community engagement, some stopgap fixes that don't take too much money. And I think that's something we should be just thinking about a lot more when it comes to Ives Park is, the Public Works Department really has some strong and good priorities and is executing them well in terms of the delivery of the vision of the Ives Park Master Plan. And I think that the way that we can really add value is by increasing community engagement and figuring out the more gargantuan tasks and how we can accomplish them with pretty low resources. Like I think as has been brought up by Commissioner Fritz and others, there are different elements of tactical urbanism that can be applied to creating a temporary plaza that cannot really jazz up a chain link fence if you just add some painted plastic slats. And those are ways where you can get some community buy-in too. So I just want to note as a final point here that as we're looking to the next meeting, I think we should be thinking about the formation of the subcommittee. I had been sort of tapped to spearhead that, but didn't proceed as I had received interest from a total of 4 commissioners, which would be out of compliance with Brown Act. So I think just thinking about who wants to be part of that subcommittee, what sort of crossover it might be able to have with the Public Arts Commission, especially as this pertains a lot to some of the developments around the Vets building. And also just looking beyond, I think, the development of a foundation as the primary goal of such a subcommittee. And maybe it's just an Ives Park improvement subcommittee, since that's what we seem to have landed on. But yeah, I just think that this might not be the best time to be looking at the development of a parks foundation, just with the economic situation that we're dealing with. So with that, I'll leave it to the next meeting, and thank you all very much again.
Okay. I'll save my comments for the next meeting. I just have only one thing is the slats that are on the west side of Ives there's a stage there. I think they could be painted into some kind of a design. I think it would really spruce things up there. So Dante, would you be available to do something similar again in the future for another meeting?
Certainly, I can make myself available for another
We kind of continue from where we're leaving off here.
Yeah, I mean, I took notes. I can work with Carrie to try and address some of those via email as well, if that's helpful.
Okay. Great. All right. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you being here and your time and everything that you do for us. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Let's see. Anything else for this special meeting, Carrie? We're good, right?
Yeah, I think we are good to adjourn this meeting,
Okay.
and I would suggest a 5-minute break so we can get people in.
Yeah.
And we have our technology to switch over.
Okay. So let's convene at 7:10. About 8 minutes. Is that good? Okay. All right. Thank you. And I'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Hey, Carrie, it's Juliana. Can you hear me okay?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes, I can hear you, Juliana.
Okay.
It sounds good.
I also just shared my screen a minute ago, so I didn't know if that.
Yes, I can see that, and I will, or I'll ask you to pause it. I don't know if I can pause it for you. Oh, I can stop it. But if you want, you can. We'll need to call the meeting to order, take public comments on items not on the agenda, and a couple other things before we start in a new presentation.
Okay, I'll just leave. Or do you want me to leave? I'll just leave it on that an opening slide. Because the agenda I have there is more just specific to the planning process.
Yeah, I think I might stop your sharing just because it's easier to see who's all there when I'm taking roll call than to try to.
Oh, right. You know what? I can do that for you.
Yeah, you might be able to pause it, and then it might be easier for you to call it back up again. I don't know. All right, and Julianne, I just figured out a way to just change the proportion so I can see everybody and do roll call without you changing the screen.
Sure. Yeah, I just tried to do that too.
Chair Fernandez, are we ready to start the meeting? And you're on mute.
There we go. Right.
There we go. Okay.
Okay. Good. Sorry, I wasn't able to unmute. Okay, so we have, I can't see who else is on here, so I'm assuming we have a quorum.
Yes, and we actually have been joined by Commissioner Ottinger, so we have a full commission.
Great. All right. So I'd like to call this.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Okay, now I'd like to officially start the Planning Commission meeting, regular meeting of October 27, 2020. And let me just state that this meeting complies with the Sonoma County Health Officer's COVID-19 order to shelter in place issued on March 17, 2020, and pursuant to California Governor Newsom's Executive Order N-29-20 issued on March 17th, 2020. Okay, so first on the agenda, did you want to, do we need to do a roll call since we have a different number of commissioners here? Carrie, what do you think?
I can do that. Let's see, Chair Fernandez.
Here.
Vice Chair Fritz.
Here.
Commissioner Dauch.
Here.
Commissioner Ottinger. And sorry, this will also help me make sure that I've unmuted you, the commissioners.
Here.
Commissioner Wilson,
Here.
Commissioner Kelly. Okay, Commissioner Kelly, are you able to unmute yourself? Perfect.
Oh, good, I'm back. Yes, I am here. I was stuck in mute land.
Thank you. Commissioner Lindenbush
Here.
and Commissioner Haug.
Here.
All right, we do have a full commission. Thank you, Chair Fernandez.
Great, thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to item number 3, and this is for an opportunity for public comment for items that are not on tonight's agenda. So if you would like to speak, you can physically raise your hand or use the hand raising feature on the Zoom call. And Carrie, go ahead and let me know if you see anybody for that.
Thank you. And I will note while I'm looking around that we have not received any public comments for in writing or email. And I did not see any additional public comments for items not on the agenda tonight.
Okay. So I will close that section. Go item number 4. Any statements of conflict of interest from commissioners? Okay. We'll move on to item number 5, regular agenda. Item 5A, local hazard mitigation plan. Planning Commission workshop, and I'll turn it over to Director Swanstrom.
Thank you, Chair Fernandez. So I want to welcome everybody who is joining us tonight. This is our first public workshop for the city's local hazard mitigation plan. We have a couple of special folks joining us this evening that I'd like to introduce. The first is our Fire Chief, Bill Braga. He is on the line on a phone call. And Bill, I don't know if you want to say a quick hello to folks.
Thank you, Carrie. Yeah, I look forward to this process, and thank you for allowing us to get in on your meeting tonight to start off our public workshop. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Bill. And then there's a couple other folks who are also on the stakeholder group who are here tonight. Commissioner Douch is representing the Red Cross and business owners for us. And we also have Skip Geralds, who is the community public safety outreach coordinator for the city, who works with Bill. And then lastly, I'd like to introduce our consultant, Juliana Prosperi from Wood, and I will let her go through the presentation. I do see a question. Can we end the screen sharing so we can see other participants? So Juliana has an overview presentation, and once she's done with that, we can certainly do that.
Okay. You want me to start the presentation? Okay. Well, I am going to provide, as Carrie mentioned, an overview of the local hazard mitigation planning process that the City of Sebastopol will follow in the development of their first tailored and standalone plan for the city. And I'll get into some of the background and provide a little background onto the federal legislation, such as the Federal Disaster Mitigation Act that drives these requirements for these plans, as well as cover the planning process, as I mentioned, will follow, and then get into some of the nuts and bolts of the risk assessment and mitigation strategy that we will prepare. That's a component of the plan itself, and then some of the next steps in the planning process, as shown on the agenda here. So I just wanted to say welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining the call this evening. I'm excited to talk about this, and I know the city is excited has started the planning process already, and they're excited to start sharing, that process with the public. So hopefully at the end of this, we all have a better understanding of what hazard mitigation means, and why it's important to prepare these plans. So you guys already kind of went through a few of the introductions. Again, my name's Juliana Prosperi. I work at Wood Environment and Infrastructure Solutions in Sacramento or Rancho Cordova. I support our hazard mitigation and emergency management team on the preparation of various elements of these plans across California. We've done several of these plans for some other jurisdictions in the city, in the county of Sonoma, as well as, mostly across the Bay Area and Sierra Nevada area. My background is environmental science and planning, and I have about almost 2 decades now of experience doing these types of plans and other plans and compliance work in California as well. So excited to share a little bit about what I know and why these plans are important with you all. So to get started, I wanted to get just some basic definitions shared and what it's meant by the term hazard mitigation. This is any sustained action taken to reduce or permanently eliminate long-term risks to human life and property from natural or human-caused hazards. It's an essential component of the emergency management cycle, along with preparedness, response, and recovery. Typical examples of hazard mitigation include things such as strengthening buildings or retrofitting buildings to be seismically retrofitted, elevating flood-prone structures, maintaining defensible space. If you're managing lots of property, say in a watershed or you're a water district, you own a lot of property, as well as limiting development in floodplains through various land use and planning tools. So Sebastopol's experienced a range of natural disasters, particularly flood hazards in the past. And the larger community has also directly experienced some of the wildfire impacts and recent poor air quality and smoke. And so the community is no stranger. We're still kind of recovering from some of these events, but this whole process emphasizes that each time we experience these different events and hazards, we learn how to make our communities more safe and more resilient. So these events really kind of underscore the need to manage that risk, understand it, assess it, and then really move the management cycle away from just what used to be this disaster response recovery and really integrate emphasize integration of mitigation and preparedness actions in the emergency management cycle. So again, just shifting the city towards mitigation breaks the cycle of losses that we've seen occur after disasters. According to a report that's regularly updated every few years by the National Institute of Building Sciences, it's estimated that every dollar invested in hazard mitigation can save on average of $6 in the long term. I think this is an important fact why, cities across California and elsewhere are excited to start preparing these plans or update them if they're updating them. It provides a detailed look at the hazards within a city's, limits or sphere of influence. It's a living plan, allows municipalities to track their mitigation projects or actions to reduce risk across a range of different hazards that could impact Sebastopol. So there's a couple of photos here of recent hazard events and major disasters, and most of these are Sonoma area with the fires near Santa Rosa, Tubbs Fire. I think that middle picture is just actually City of Sebastopol fire staff, perhaps recently responding on a fire. I think the Lightning Complex fire. And there's been flooding events on the Laguna. And, there's also earthquake hazards that can impact the Bay Area. There's a recent large earthquake, 2014, that had large impacts in the city of Napa, and that's what the photo is on the top right. So what is
Juliana, can I pause for just a second? I just want to make sure, are other people seeing, I'm still seeing only the first slide, so I'm wondering if, okay, I'm seeing a nod in the audience that everyone else is on, we're only on the first slide.
Let me re-share. Hold on a second.
You've got some great graphics that I think are really telling. So
Okay,
make sure the audience can see them.
Hold on. Now, yeah, I think it was. yeah, so let me know when you see, let me just go back to where I started. Okay.
Great, now it's updated.
Do you
Thanks.
see the what is hazard mitigation graphic now?
Yes,
Okay.
thanks.
Well, we'll quickly go to the pictures. Yeah, so this was some of the photos from recent events that have happened around Sebastopol and in Sonoma County. And then I was just mentioning that, photo of the earthquake was just, another hazard. Earthquakes and seismic hazards been major concerns of some other cities in the Bay Area and in Sonoma County. So we've been, looking in detail and doing risk assessments for seismic hazards as well in these plans. So you can see the photos. So I think this is where I left off. So some of the federal regulatory requirements that drive the preparation of these plans at a federal level are coming from the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000. This amended the Stafford Act. That was the original Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act, which sole purpose was to reduce the loss of life and property or economic disruptions resulting from natural disasters. Congress passed DMA, or we call it DMA of 2000, to reinforce the importance of planning for natural disasters and to reduce the impact of those disasters and the losses associated with them and promote hazard mitigation. The requirements of the code are summarized in this little number here, Code of Federal Regulations. We have a little summary of what those requirements are that we put in the beginning of each of our plans, just to make clear, at least there's a crosswalk segment to it when California Office of Emergency Services and FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, review these plans. So you will see that legal requirement throughout our planning documents. And the act requires that these plans be prepared to become eligible for pre and post-disaster assistance funding. And they're also a prerequisite to remain eligible once you have a plan adopted. You're supposed to update it every 5 years to remain eligible for those funding opportunities. So this requirement applies to all local governments, so counties, cities, school districts, special districts like water districts, Native American tribes and organizations, and other public entities. So again, having a plan in place is a good thing to have, and it will ensure the city is ready and eligible for various funding opportunities when those become available. In California, there's also several regulatory drivers that are required here that go above and beyond what we do at a federal level to meet FEMA requirements. I'll just kind of go through a couple here that are mostly related or required as part of a general plan safety element. Some are also encouraged, not required. So there's different language in the legislation and the requirements of the various bills that were passed through the legislature in the last 5 to 6, 7 years. But the first one that we've been focusing a lot has been Senate Bill 379, and that requires the inclusion of a climate adaptation discussion and integration of climate adaptation strategies in the general plan safety element. Because local hazard mitigation plans are often adopted or amended into the general plan safety element after the hazard mitigation plan is approved. We integrate and make sure that we're also discussing climate change and adaptation strategies in these plans, so they're consistent with the general plan. Senate Bill 1000 required the inclusion of environmental justice and equity policies or goals, or a standalone environmental justice element as part of the general plan. We've been integrating these discussions within a chapter called the Community Profile that just kind of summarizes the demographics and economics and the populations within cities or counties to make sure that we cover that. And then we also discuss within the vulnerability assessment, how various hazards could, have more intense impacts on some of those vulnerable and socially vulnerable populations. in cities. AB 2140 encourages, so this is one that's encourages, it's not required, the adoption of this plan that we're going to put together and develop into the general plan and safety element. However, if this plan is integrated into the general plan, it also opens up additional funding opportunities through the California State Assistant Funding Program. So there's additional disaster mitigation funds that can be recouped by getting it simply amended into the general plan safety element. And then a few of the others here are pretty specific to wildfire planning, identifying wildfire risks in your high fire hazard severity zones, integrating review. This is again specific to the general plan, review by the State Board of Forestry and Fire Protection. And then most recently, after the Camp Fire, there was the development of Senate Bill 99, which required that we identify residential neighborhoods that do not have at least 2 emergency evacuation routes, given that was a huge issue in that fire and limited evacuation. So we're starting to look at a lot more things in California that we're not looking at in such detail in other states. So it's important to understand, why there's going to be some level of detail, I guess, on those topics in this plan. And maybe if you've worked on a plan in another state, you didn't see that. So this planning process is also going to align with the National Flood Insurance Program community rating system. And this, Congress passed the National Flood Insurance Act in 1968, and that established the NFIP program. It's a program for communities in the insurance industry and the government, and it enables property owners and communities that participate in this program to purchase insurance against flood losses in exchange for state and community floodplain management regulations designed to reduce flood damages in the future. So if a community adopts or enforces floodplain management or has programs in place to reduce flood risk associated with new construction in those floodplains, the government will make that flood insurance available within the community as a financial protection against flood losses. And this insurance is designed to provide an insurance alternative to disaster assistance to reduce the increasing costs associated with flood damage and repetitive loss properties. There's also changes in California and across the country just associated with increasing costs that are just driving these plans besides the regulatory requirements. This is particularly associated with the fact that we just have more people and more structures across the state, across the country. There's also been different kinds of natural and human cause and human health hazards impacting our families and businesses here. And this is evident with the recent shelter-in-place restrictions in the state since the COVID pandemic. And there's also just more disaster declarations each year, and in turn, increased response costs. So there's sort of additional reasons on why it's important to prepare hazard mitigation plans. So again, we prepare these plans to shift the city closer towards breaking that cycle associated with the high cost of response and recovery. These plans are predictable, they're repetitive, they prepare the communities better to make the cities and Sebastopol a safer place to be. They also make the city more prepared and proactive. Hazard mitigation plans guide mitigation activities in a coordinated manner and also in a transparent way that the city can track, and we can share those successes with the public and our stakeholders. And then again, the big one, is enabling the city to be eligible for this pre and post-disaster funding. And then finally, these plans integrate and take into account other planning mechanisms that have already been set in place, such as the general plan safety element. By integrating those, this plan into that plan and vice versa, and making sure they're consistent and then they complement each other. So there's also several plans like this in place at a county level, at a state level. And so I'll get into some of the stakeholders that we're working with, because working with some of our sister agencies helps us maximize the usefulness of, taking into account what's already been done or accomplished or successful in another plan in another jurisdiction. So they really set the course for response and recovery, and make the communities that we live in safer and build resiliency within our communities. We follow a FEMA, or Federal Emergency Management Agency's original 4-phase planning process or framework. That framework was updated in 2013 with a 9-step planning process, which is sort of broken down in this graphic shown here. But phase 1 consists of just organizing our resources, building a planning team, understanding what our planning area is going to be, pulling together stakeholders that may make up that planning team, building an outreach strategy so we can engage the public, and then doing a preliminary review of what are our baseline existing mitigation community capabilities. Phase 2 is the risk assessment. The risk assessment determines the potential impacts of the hazards to, the community, our population, as well as the economy, and as well as the built and natural environment. It also provides the foundation for the rest of the community and helps inform the mitigation strategy, which is the next phase, phase 3. This is the sort of the heart of the plan. It serves as a long-term blueprint, similar like a general plan, and showing and telling how we're going to reduce losses within the city, losses or risks that were identified in the risk assessment. It also describes how the community will accomplish the mission of the planning process, and it includes the goals and then the actions and then action plan. So who's responsible for implementation? And I'll get into that in a little more detail. So in a minute. So for City of Sebastopol, the planning area was defined as the city limits. And as shown there, you can see that's most of you are probably familiar with, it's the black dotted line. And then we have the sphere of influence shown there as well. With that said, I just should emphasize too that, there's a lot of regional hazards that may not be specific to the small little, limits of the city, but so we do take into account, some of the surrounding wildfire hazards in the plan itself. So we kind of take a larger look at it, but all the analysis that we do, and I'll get into this, is specific, to what we're intersecting us in the city limits. So any facilities and the population specific to the city. So we can have sort of a defined area to conduct the GIS analysis. So as part of the process, we also built did you say something, Carrie? Oh, we also, we just recently built a planning team that consists of several folks that are on this call that are part of the City of Sebastopol, and then several additional. So the folks on the top are just, the core team, such as Carrie and Bill. And then we also have several other folks that represent various departments in the city that have, for example, like land use authority, building and safety, floodplain administrator, public works, that are going to have, a lot to say, or, have strong influence and input on the planning process, given their positions at the city. And then we also integrated an equal amount of stakeholders within the community from various organizations, particularly those that the city felt could also inform the hazard mitigation planning process and the development of the plan. And then our team is myself, and then Jeff Briswan, who I work with, he leads our hazard mitigation planning group. He's sort of leading kind of the background technical expertise, and he's been on some of our initial calls with the city as well. And our team is really just like a planner, a GIS specialist, and some other emergency management specialists that help develop the hazard profiles and the risk assessment for this plan. So for the planning process, we are required to engage the public and provide at least 2 opportunities from public involvement during the planning process. The first is to occur during the draft development of the plan. And so that's the intent of scheduling this meeting, now, because we're just getting started on the development of the plan, and we haven't even quite gotten to the risk assessment yet. So we're going to just cover the planning process, but then also engaging the public again once that plan is available and on the streets are being circulated for public review. We use various tools to provide outreach and engage in the public to participate in this process. Some key tools are just, the development of a dedicated website on the City of Sebastopol's, off the City of Sebastopol's main page. Sometimes we'll request a stakeholder from the public to be on the planning team. We use social media announcements and blasts and newsletters and press releases. We're also going to circulate a public survey that's forthcoming. And then there's some plans to piggyback on some existing outreach through the school district. The school district is in the process of developing their plan, or their multi-hazard mitigation plan. And I know Gerald is on the call, and he's the city's public outreach coordinator. I know that he has a distribution list of several hundred folks that we're going to ask to participate in the survey. So there's various tools that we're going to use to engage the public, in addition to just the workshops, and then the public, the formal public comment process on plans. So we also, phase one consists of getting an understanding of what the existing mitigation capabilities in the city are. And this is based on taking an inventory of the existing and proposed policies, programs, ordinances that may affect the vulnerability to hazards in the city's planning area. We look at the effectiveness of those different policies in place. And also whether there's any shortfalls or, for example, inconsistencies between plans, that can happen. So shown here are just some of the city's existing capabilities, starting with the general plan safety element through their zoning and ordinance, municipal code. They also, I forgot to get into this on the previous slide, but the City of Sebastopol did have an existing plan that was prepared by the city. It's prepared by the Association of Bay Area Governments back in 2005 on behalf of the city, and it was a regional plan that covered the entire San Francisco Bay Area. And then they updated that plan, ABAG did, in 2010. And so several cities that we've worked with now have had these older kind of plans that have now expired, but they do have what's called an annex. So they were a participating agency. An ABAG would coordinate all of the cities to prepare different mitigation actions. So there are some old annexes, we kind of dig up to find what some of the original mitigation strategies were, so we could capture, whether those have been completed or they're still underway, to make sure that they're integrated into this plan. And then there's just a couple others I've noted here related to some climate action plans that will be taking account and integrating into this plan as well. So the risk assessment itself it's comprised of three components: the hazard identification process, the vulnerability assessment, and then the mitigation capability assessment. This assessment covers the hazards that were profiled in the hazard mitigation plan and determines the impact that they may have on the community and the built structures in the city of Sebastopol. So this part of the plan asks, what can happen here in Sebastopol? What can happen that may affect the city's critical infrastructure? This assessment provides, some information on the extent of injury or damages that may result if there is to be a hazard event. And we pull this information together based on input from the community, from the Hazard Mitigation Planning Committee. We distributed a poll just a week ago to the committee to kind of get input to make sure we're covering all the hazards that they want, looked at in this plan. And that includes both the natural hazards and some man-made and human health hazards. So the vulnerability assessment is another piece I mentioned. So after we profile the hazards, our team models and maps what will be affected. This is also integrating what we call a critical asset inventory, or an inventory of the community lifeline facilities. And so these are facilities that are essential to keep in operation or be functional after a disaster may occur, wildfire may occur, and so that folks have, safe places to go. So community shelters. There's several different types of these categories of FEMA community lifeline facilities listed on the slide. Obviously, health and medical facilities would be hospitals. Energy facilities would be major, say substations. Communications would be something like a radio tower, ensuring communication is available and ongoing during these events. And then transportation could be key roadways used for evacuation, bridges, so on. So this part of the plan summarizes the impacts really created by the intersection of our hazard data, which are in most cases available in some type of quantitative mapping, and then the intersection of that data with the city's critical assets or critical facilities. So where those two overlap is where we have that risk. And the idea is to kind of keep that risk smaller or lower so we can lower the risk in the city. So phase 3 is the development of the mitigation strategy. This is the action part of the plan. It lays out the goals, objectives, as well as those specific projects the city will take to reduce risk. This part of the plan has to be flexible enough to be expanded or changed or improved over time as hazard conditions do change. The goals are a general guideline that will develop. There will be new goals for this plan on what the community wants to achieve with the local hazard mitigation plan. We'll do that in our 3rd meeting. So we'll be developing some broad statements on what we want to achieve. Those are usually based on eliminating losses or reducing losses, particularly to at-risk facilities, critical facilities, and even the natural environments. And then the mitigation actions are the specific parts of our projects that help the city achieve the goals. So these may range from very simple actions or projects to very complex. This gets at, asking what can we do to change the impact, reduce casualties, property damage? What can we do to protect the public and public safety? Who are our vulnerable populations? Where are they? How can we protect those specific populations with specific projects and actions? This part of the strategy also asks, how do we alter those stressors and these threats that are related to increased fuels, drier conditions, more intense storms, and then also sea level rise and other flooding type or flood related hazards. So most of these mitigation alternatives are classified into 6 categories shown here. And these range from prevention, property protection, natural resource protection, emergency services, structural projects, as well as, structural improvements and public information or public education projects. And so we go through all these different types of projects as we develop the strategy. So prevention, just real quick, is really intended to keep the hazard. Those are projects that are intended to keep the hazard from getting worse. So ensuring that future development is not sited in places where there could be hazard losses. So that's things like open space preservation, planning and zoning, use of your building code, property protection. These are projects where you may modify a building that's already subject to some type of hazard rather than trying to prevent it from occurring. Natural resource protection are actions intended to really reduce the intensity of the hazard, as well as improve the quality of the environment or the habitat. So things like erosion or sediment control projects, wetland enhancements that are, may have some flood protection value, or natural resource protection projects. And then there's structural improvements. So this is projects, they're called structural because there's some kind of man-made construction component. So think things like, dams, dikes, levees, seawalls, flood control structures, or even elevating our roads. And then public education is another really important one that's, really reminding people about whether they may live or not live in a hazardous area and the actions as property owners that they can take to be aware and, what they can do to avoid potential damage to or injury to themselves or damage to their property. Because the majority of, you know, we're trying to protect are the people that in the property owners and, you know, these resources and structures that are homes and residences and businesses in the city as well. So, and then recently, just another California piece here, you know, the state CalES and Office of Planning and Research just came out with the 2020 California Adaptation Planning Guide. So it has some more good ideas on that are more climate adaptation related and specific that we can start integrating into these plans related to flooding, sea level rise, and wildfire hazards. So that last phase was the adoption and implementation of the plan. So once these plans are completed and we have a draft and we've circulated it for public review, we submit them to California Office of Emergency Services, or CalES, and FEMA, and the state has 45 days, excuse me, now I'm talking too much, 45 days to review. And then once they've blessed the project, and they may request revisions, they may not, we would meet with them to go over any edits they may want. And they then pass on pre-approval and say, you know, ask that FEMA reviews it. And then FEMA has 45 days to also review it. Sometimes that review happens concurrently if we get lucky, but that review can take longer, especially if their staff is kind of busy with response activities or wildfire actions in the state. But at that point, it can go to council. If once it's been approved or pre-approved by both agencies, it can go to the city council for review or consideration and then adoption. At that point too, there's another option for the public to chime in on that process, and plan is adopted. However, in between the 5-year periods where we update these plans, it's very important to then kind of initiate the implementation phase, where a project manager may be assigned at the city to coordinate and champion the implementation of the plan itself, to track actions, integrate those actions into staff work plans, and then monitor changes over time, and whether there has been grant opportunities for this action or there hasn't been, but also to evaluate whether hazard conditions has changed in the community. Sometimes cities or counties actually will update their plan sooner than every 5 years because there's been a major disaster declaration and something's changed and they need to readdress and replan and turn back to the hazard mitigation plan itself. But otherwise, they're required to be updated every 5 years. So the risk assessment is kind of the more interesting and more technical piece of these planning documents. We start looking at the hazards that may be of potential concern for a city or a county or an agency based on what may have been looked at in the region. In this case, we'll start with the California State Enhanced Multi-Hazard Mitigation Plan to ensure that it's consistent with those planning efforts. So we start with a list of hazards that were addressed there and do sort of a crosswalk on what's appropriate and applicable to the city of Sebastopol. FEMA requires us to look at all natural hazards. We're not required to look at the human cause or the human health hazards, but we may address these hazards in these plans. So that's why I have the natural hazards listed first that we've considered for this plan, and then the health hazards and some of the human cause hazards that we're also going to be looking at in this plan. And this is based on some of the input we got from our recent meetings. With that, I also just will add that we also evaluate these hazards to different levels of detail in the plan. Some of the hazards are profiled and fully assessed with vulnerability assessments, GIS mapping, as well as what's called using some of FEMA's tools. Some of them are called HAZUS models and risk map products that we use. HAZUS just means Hazards US and allows us to model and kind of assess some of the hazards that have quantitative mapping, information related to them. And those are things like flooding, earthquake hazards, and wildfire hazards. So we will be mapping quantitatively at least 5 of the 9 listed here. And then again, these are all going to be evaluated based on best available data, maps, and science-based studies that are already out there. So The other thing to keep in mind too during the planning process is if we identify all these hazards, FEMA does require jurisdictions to identify at least one actionable mitigation project for each of their highest impact hazards or highest prioritized hazards. And I'll get in a little bit in a minute here on what the prioritization means. But this slide just shows, if you wanted to take a minute, we did want to get some input from the commissioners today, and then also the public that's on the line for the call. And so if you go to slido.com, that website right there, and there'll be a little spot where you can enter an event code. And if you put in that number 29986, there will be a poll, a virtual poll you can take, and it asks what are the top 5 hazards the city should assess in the local hazard mitigation plan. So we all took this, well, I didn't take it, but the planning committee took this poll last week. So we thought it'd be great to kind of compare the poll results this evening with what, the results were last week. I'm not going to go to that right now, but I just wanted to encourage everyone to try it out. And then I think, Carrie, you said you're going to post it or paste it in the chat.
Yeah, I
chat
have
room.
posted it in the chat. So if you see at the bottom of your screen, there's a chat button. If you look at that, you should be able to either cut and paste to a screen, or if it comes through as a link to the slido.com website, and then the poll numbers in there as well.
Okay. Yeah, we'll come back to this at the end so everyone can see the results. It just shows you real-time results on the poll. But yeah, please. So you also have some time to fiddle around and play with it, and hopefully it works. But so the risk assessment is, as I mentioned, some of the more technical part, more of the technical section or chapter of our plan. We organized this assessment into 6 subsections described on this slide here. The hazard description is just capturing or defining what the hazard is and why it's a problem. The location or spatial extent section usually will start off with a nice map illustrating where the hazard is or how much it covers the planning area. And so these may be maps of the wildfire hazard severity zones or the fire threats or the floodplain within the city limits. Past occurrences is the list of historical events, and this may be based on disaster declarations or just known impacts and events that have occurred in the city. Extent gets into the severity of the hazard. This is also the measure of the strength of the hazard event. So in other words, how much damage can that hazard occur, and what kind of damage does it cause? So this is usually determined using technical terms that are specific to the hazard. For example, the Richter scale measures the magnitude of an earthquake, and for hurricanes, we use the Saffir-Simpson wind scale, and so on. And there's some development of also a similar measurement for impacts of wildfires. So next is the probability of occurrence. This addresses the change of the occurrence and the likelihood of that hazard happening in the next year. And then finally, we summarize all this qualitatively to come up with a significance level. So if there is a hazard that's covering over 50% of the city's planning area or city limits, and it's likely to damage more than 50% of the property if it were to occur, and it has a high likelihood of happening next year, that would be a hazard that has a high significance level. So climate change is also integrated into those sections. It's one of the last sections that we've recently, in the last 4 or 5 years, added on or integrated into these plans. It's an increasingly important factor that's affecting disaster management in the cycle. It's also affecting the frequency and severity of these hazards. So it has the ability to intensify impacts. We kind of summarize that again qualitatively we think based on studies and scientific data or in models in emissions that if it's going to have a lower, medium, or high impact on the hazard. So that's got its own section. And these have just been really important impacts that we're trying to better understand in these plans. And, California is already experiencing these impacts associated with the prolonged drought, the severity of the wildfires that we're seeing. There's increased tree mortality, as well as increased coastal flooding on the Sonoma coast, and sea level rise that's also impacting cities and jurisdictions along the San Pablo Bay and on tidally influenced rivers. So we are going to be getting into a little bit on that, as well as how sea level rise may impact, changes on the laguna. So it will be evaluated. So next steps, the city has been pretty busy so far with a lot of planning and coordinating over the last 4 months. We kickstarted the planning process in June, and then developed the planning committee. This just shows, some of the progress so far, which is just highlighted, or it's in bold on the bottom there. So we've gotten some resources, we've got ourselves organized and had our first planning committee meeting last week. And then we're having the public workshop this evening. So the next couple of steps are somewhat focused on spreading the word about the planning process and engaging the public. And then we are also in the process of starting to get all the data organized so we can start the risk assessment. And I should just say, these plans do take about anywhere from 9 to 12 months to develop. And so, there's plenty of opportunities to stay engaged and involved and, be thoughtful and, about our planning process. So the detailed schedule is shown there. This is somewhat tentative, but sometimes helpful to see like actual dates. So everyone kind of understands, when specifically we may be seeing a draft out for public review, which may be next spring is what, or early part of the summer. And so at that time, there'd be another public workshop where the public can also comment on the actual plan, given they'll have a little more time to, review it, see the maps, see the information, see the findings, and, see what some of the actions were developed by the committee. So at this point, I wanted to just open it up to kind of questions and answers from the commissioners and the public. I guess that would come after, but just really say thanks for taking the time to listen to me talk this evening. And I think these pods are really important, and I just appreciate, the time you are and that you're on the call. But then here are just a couple of reminders on just if you, and I think, Carrie, you went over some of this maybe in the beginning, but if you do have a question, you can, and you're on a video, you can just wave your hand. Otherwise, mute your microphone, and just kind of keep noise to a minimum. And then you can also put questions in the chat box. And then when it is your turn to speak, just make sure you unmute yourself. So I have another slide here with what some of those functions look like on the screen in case we're not all Zoom savvy yet. So there's the chat button and then the Q&A button. And I think you've
right. And thank you.
Chat button going with the Slido. And I'm gonna.
Yeah, and I'm gonna let Juliana hop off for a second just to with the poll. It appears that only one.
I'm gonna try to. Do you want me to try to do that right now?
Yeah, so she's going to try to fix that shortly, but
okay.
Hold on a minute. I am going to mute everyone, but then you will be able to unmute yourself. It'll change the settings in the program, so there's less issues with the muting. So, okay, so everyone, Chair Fernandez?
Yeah, thank you, Joanna. Appreciate that. I'm going to bring it up to Commission for questions. And then we'll open it up for public comment and then bring it back to Commission, just so you know our process there. I don't know, Carrie, if you want to add anything to this before we go with those questions.
No, I think that is a good process. And I will note we do have, as Juliana noted, Bill, the fire chief, the public outreach coordinator, and myself here. We also have Zach, who's on our planning committee, and also Chris Andrig from the Special Community Cultural Center, who will also be on our stakeholder meeting as well tonight.
Okay, yeah, I think it makes sense for them to go ahead and continue on with presentation. So if you want to, Chief, if you want to go in next, or however you want to do that. And it looks like we're still sharing screen though.
All right, I'm gonna take that down. There we go. Okay, so if we, Chair Fernandez, can you do a round robin with the commissioners to get us started?
Do you want to do, do you think it would be better if we just did everybody do their presentation and then do the questions rather than one at a time?
I think that is it for the presentation. We don't have any,
I mean,
Glenn, I don't have presentations.
I mean, like that the chief has comments or some of the other speakers has comments. Do you want to do that or you just want to open it up at this point?
I think just opening it up would be
Okay,
great.
all right, let's do that. All right, so Vice Chair Fritz, we'll start with you. If you have any questions or comments for tonight, and then after we're done, we'll open up for public comment.
I guess my only question at this point is I'm just wondering what the commission's role in this process is, and specifically tonight. I mean, are you looking for, it sounds like it's mostly kind of informational tonight. I mean, do you want any feedback specifically from us, or that's my question. What is our role and what are you looking for tonight?
Sure, I can get us started and Juliana can add to it. So this was an introduction to the process, but I think one of the other things that we're also trying to get a sense of, you know, it's kind of interesting when I wrote the RFP for this, for the consultant, it was, gosh, I guess it was a couple months after the evacuation last year. So PSPSs were on my mind and Bill's mind and Glenn's as we discussed things, the flooding that happened in 2019, obviously. So we wrote the RFP to not just do the physical hazard, but also look at things like the power outages and the impacts they can have, climate change and drought and things like that, that are not necessarily or have not in the past been fully recognized as potential hazards. I have been through this process once before in another community, developing their own standalone plan, and they looked at those things. We did also assess things and rank them, frankly, fairly low. Things like civil unrest and pandemic. Well, of course, since the RFP and hiring the consultant, we have had what we've had. Huge Black Lives Matter protests, and we have a huge pandemic. So I think one of the things that I really look to this, the commission, as well as the members of the public who have joined us, but you are a great representation of a community who are a group of really smart people who have a lot of different expertise. So one of the things I think we'll want to get to after questions is, are there hazards? I guess there's a couple of questions that Juliana and I were talking about that would be helpful to get from this group. One is, are there hazards that aren't on this list that we should perhaps be thinking about? And I go back to the fact that Commissioner Kelly was asking about, you know, what are you guys doing about coronavirus? And I think January at a meeting before the federal government even had sort of any inkling of what was going on. So your expertise is valuable that way. And I think the other piece of it is if there are, you know, so for flooding, we understand that the Barlows and, you know, and much of the eastern part of the town along the Laguna down behind Palm Dome, east of Palm Dome Hospital, Cooper Road, and those areas are subject to flooding from a map perspective, but do you all know of other particular places that have, you know, localized flooding or localized, you know, yeah, well, high winds might not be really a huge issue in Sebastopol, but guess what? There's this one place that is, that we just don't know about because that you might. And so those are the two pieces that of input I really want to get from the commission tonight for this project.
All right, thanks. I don't have anything else at this time.
Okay. Commissioner Dausch, you want to add anything to that, or questions or comments?
Thank you. No, I don't have anything to add. I'm on the planning committee for this project, and looking forward to learning more about it as we get into that. In that role, I'm representing business owners and the Red Cross and their activities around emergency planning and response.
Great.
No questions.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ottinger? Oh, you're muted.
I don't have any questions right now. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Wilson? Is he with us there? Oh, okay, I can come back. Commissioner Kelly?
I'm good myself. It's be interesting to see how the process comes forward.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lindenbush?
Thank you, Chair Fernandez, and thank you, Juliana, for a really fantastic presentation. I definitely learned a lot about sort of the ins and outs of the policy history on a state and federal level as to how we got to this point and why some of these elements are included in this process. So I look forward to seeing this process unfold. I just had a sort of a general question for anyone on staff that would be willing to answer. Maybe it would be best for Skip as the Public Safety Outreach Coordinator. I'm just interested to hear sort of how anybody on the committee envisions public outreach going through this process beyond the workshops, which I think are really helpful. But if someone could just outline, what sort of community engagement strategies are going to be deployed, what kind of resources are going to be put into this process, I think that would be really helpful for both the commission and the community here tonight.
Do you want me to go with that, Carrie, a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Skip. And I think Juliana probably knows a couple of the things that we're planning on as well.
Yeah, I mean, Giuliani, if you want to go first with that, that's certainly okay by me.
You can start, and then I can add on to what we will do. I had a slide about it.
Okay, great. So, for me, that's a really great question. We have two different email lists that we work from, and we have our Map Your Neighborhood classes as well as our Map Your Neighborhood Leader Council. We do a lot of exchanging of information within those groups. So at least the piece that I hold would be to be able to keep the information flowing out into that group and allowing that group to respond back directly to, Carrie or Juliana or whoever, or to respond back through us, through me in my particular position in association to the Map Your Neighborhood program itself. Does that help, Luke?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and then we also prepare it's a formal outreach strategy as part of these plans. So it's an outreach strategy plan, it's a plan as part of, within a plan sort of, but it's just specifically outlining what some of the recommended steps are that I know there was a slide on it, everything from, we help the city, we provide some background material to help them develop a website, include FAQs, frequently asked questions. And so there's a repository for folks to go to, and then everything would be on that web page. And then, that outreach strategy will outline all these other, your traditional and then your more progressive or digital type of methods for outreach to the community. There's also a section in there on, engaging community-based organizations, so there are obviously the stakeholders that are going to be formally part of the planning committee. If there's other organizations that, you may want to also reach out to, and that may be through Skip's network. An example would be to, we've done that type of engagement specific to some of the disadvantaged communities that were identified in other cities. So working with CBOs is helpful. And so that's all kind of part of the outreach strategy. So as a commissioner, if you're interested in that plan, once, Carrie has that, I'm sure she could share it with folks beyond just the planning committee for input, that, because you all know what works best for Sebastopol. So that would be helpful.
And there is a map your neighborhood event tomorrow night, isn't it? Tomorrow evening? At 6 o'clock, I believe.
Yeah, I believe there is. Either Bill or Skip, can you confirm that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I didn't hear that. Yes, there is a class tomorrow evening, and then there is a leader council meeting Thursday evening. So, and it will, what's going on in this process will be addressed there, and it's been addressed already with, I think, 3 separate emails that went out to all of them, including the survey that just went out a few minutes ago to everybody to see if they could come in and populate the survey in some way. But don't hold me to how many people do that.
Commissioner Howe.
And then,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Another
Go ahead.
question.
Oh, yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, hi, this is Bill, Fire Chief, and I'm the Director of Emergency Services for the city. This whole plan is actually perfect timing. Not only that it's required, and we should be updating our local hazard mitigation plan, but we're also in the process of updating our city's emergency plan. And that plan, the last time that was updated was in 1996. So we're a few years past due in updating our own emergency plan. So I see a lot of this going hand in hand. It's truly perfect timing. Skip's a great resource for me out there managing a whole bunch of areas that I just don't have the bandwidth to do, and Skip's doing just a wonderful job. I've been involved with the city for 36 years. And so every flood that's come by and every fire that's come by, I've touched on it. I've been there, done that. And then most recently in the last couple of years, the planned power outages with PG&E. So there's just so many elements to the local hazard mitigation plan and the city's emergency plan, and updating of both is just, like I said, it's perfect timing. Our emergency plan probably will be updated at about the same time that the local hazard mitigation plan goes through. So I wanted to share that. There's so much involved, but we're doing it now in tandem, and it's just optimal timing that we're working on this. So I'm pretty excited that we're actually doing both. The city's plan needed to be updated a long time ago, and so we're just going to update both at the same time. So I think it's going to be worth our while, the effort that we're going to put into this. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Luke, if you have other questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Chief Braga, by the way. I had one question. I guess this could be best answered by Commissioner Dauch or Director Swanstrom. Just sort of if Commissioner Dauch, if you'll be liaising to the Planning Commission, just sort of what the involvement of the Planning Commission will look like over the course of this process, or if it's mostly going to be left to the Planning Committee. And then I do have one more comment just after this.
So I think we plan to come back with I believe the assessment of the risks to review those, and whether that's, I don't know if that'll be Juliana and myself and Bill, or myself doing that. And then also reviewing the draft plan prior to going to City Council.
Okay, thank you. And then just one comment on something that I found in the slides. Under the risk assessment slide for severe weather, it noted heavy rain, thunderstorms, and dense fog. And I just wanted to note that I think extreme heat will be a strong consideration for us moving forward. I know that's definitely part of the consideration, especially as I see it's in the survey as well. But just noting that, because a lot of the time our coordination, especially in terms of cooling centers on the increasing amount of extremely hot days that we have, are administered by the county, and we don't always have one open in Sebastopol. So I think that's something that's important for us to consider, especially as we're thinking about the impact of extreme heat on vulnerable populations, whether seniors or our homeless populations. So that's my main comment from here, and I'll turn it over.
Thank you. Commissioner Howell?
I just want to thank everyone. I'm very impressed by the coordination of all these different data points. It was an amazing amount of information, and I am also was very pleased to hear Chief Braga's enthusiasm for the in tandem updating or creation of the hazard mitigation report and the updating of the emergency plan. I think it's fortuitous that we're doing both of these at the same time. And I just want to express my gratitude for everyone's work on these extremely important and timely issues.
Thank you for that. Let's see. One thing I just wanted to add in is I noticed that we've been fortunate with some of the, at least the wildfire. I know we get the flooding and so forth, that either family members, friends, or whatever if they need to evacuate. I know people have come to Sebastopol. I know they've come to my house. So I'm just wondering if that's part of the plan, as far as if that's the case, what we can do, how we can help, things that we should be aware of. I'm just wondering if that is anything that we should also be looking at.
Yeah, and I can maybe mention a few words on that. There's a lot of when Bill and I were developing the list of folks to join the stakeholder planning group, we were looking at the structure of Sebastopol is that the city has a lot of buildings, but they're operated by nonprofits. So we do have someone from the senior center, not only as a contact to seniors and that what can be a vulnerable population, but also because that is a potential cooling center. If we were able to get it outfitted with, improved with air conditioning, we have the community center, and we have, so we do have folks who are from other organizations where we would potentially have potential shelters. I've also coordinated and talked with the folks at regional parks, because during this epidemic, when the Greenville area was evacuated most recently, Ragle Ranch Park was utilized as a temporary evacuation point to give people instructions and get them assistance on their way. So I've already spoken with their director about, yes, can we include that in our plan and make sure that we're coordinated. At the same time, this plan is going on, Sonoma County is also expanding their plan to be a multi-jurisdiction plan. And while we're still doing our standalone plan, Bill and I are coordinating with that group to make sure that, for larger events where, we're either evacuating to some other town or other towns are being evacuated, and just like in the 2017, the Tubbs fire, Annalee High School, was a huge evacuation shelter. And we do have someone from the schools on that group as well, because they have the facilities as well.
Great, thank you. I'll go ahead and open it up for public comment at this point. If you like to make a comment, if you keep it on 3 minutes, and you can either physically wave your hand or go to the chat area and wave your hand that way. Director Swanson.
All right, and I see we have one raised hand. So Marion, I am unmuting you. Go ahead and speak.
Thank you for the opportunity to participate. I have been doing disaster work for almost 40 years now, so I'm happy to be able to participate in Sebastopol. In terms of the things, the hazards that were not listed in the list of hazards that you mentioned, I did not see anything under hazardous materials in terms of the human caused incidents. So certainly we don't have railroads here, but we have, enough trucks going through. There's certainly that potential. Also, one thing that we can certainly saw in 2017 is a large influx of evacuees from another town. My big worry is if the Hayward Fault ever goes, the folks from Oakland are going to be looking for somewhere else to be. So evacuees into Sebastopol from elsewhere, I think is a situation we need to look at. I'd like to see a lot of attention on public education and information for community resilience. Our Sebastopol Neighborhood Communications Unit has been talking about incident command structure, incident command system training for our group lately. That's not for everybody, but I think having wider understanding of how the emergency response works may be useful for the community. And finally, I will mention the Gravenstein Health Action Coalition as a community resource so that we don't have siloing of our efforts. There's a tremendous resource of folks who looking at health action across our community that might be a very valuable resource in terms of community resilience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Tor has a comment. Tor, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, let's see. I wrote a comment in the chat, but basically the question, there was a mention about climate change being more recognized in these planning processes recently. But with it playing such a large role in our wildfires that we're seeing and the floods we're seeing locally, I'm just wondering if any of the actions that are being considered also, do a kind of a win-win solution where you're reducing greenhouse gas emissions as well as sequestering carbon in as far as any sort of action that is coming up in these plans, or is it more just reaction to the disaster that's in front of us? So I think that's basically how. So I mean, I have some examples there that talk about, Marion talked about resilience, and I won't go on and on about things about that, but there's carbon farming, transportation changes, et cetera. Does those kinds of things, in other words, addressing the root cause of climate change, does that show up in the mitigation plan anywhere?
I can answer or just touch on that a little
Yeah,
bit.
we should wait until the public comments are done, and then
Sorry.
we'll answer those things. Yeah, that's okay. I mean, it's natural to want to answer a question immediately. So, but that's
Put myself on mute.
yeah, no problem.
And so we've got two other folks from the public here. Tamara, I can see you. Do you want to make a comment or question? Okay. And then Chris from the community center. Chris, did you have anything you wanted to mention?
No. We're glad to be part of this process, and the community center, of course, has been a disaster site in the past. So I would be really interested in talking to Juliana about our role in that.
Great, thank you. So Chair Fernandez, that is it for our public here tonight.
Okay. All right, Juliana, now you can go ahead and make your comment. Thank you. Thanks for your patience.
Sure, this was for just for Alan's comment, and I saw your chat in the chat room, comment on how much. So the plan, I'll just start off by, these hazard mitigation plans are more focused on, I guess, the climate adaptation side of it versus greenhouse gas emissions mitigation. However, with that said, we do address climate change and, get into the core, reasons and anthropogenic effects, where it's stemming from, why we're having changes in climate as it relates to increased greenhouse gas emissions in the planet itself. So there's a science-based background. However, the the actions or the projects that typically come out of it are a little more focused on adaptation versus typically what you mentioned in the question there was on, reducing or altering or changing transportation patterns. And those are typically what, and you can add onto this, Carrie, if I'm not saying this right, for what plans you may have already in place, but those types of actions that may change like behaviors and transportation patterns, as I mentioned, maybe in like something like we call a climate action plan, something that starts off with a greenhouse gas inventory, so we can kind of understand what the community-wide, emissions are in Sebastopol, and what influence the city or capabilities the city may have to change or alter those patterns as they relate to transportation and building and operational sources. So the focus of this plan is a little bit different than that. It does look more at, well, what's already happening and how climates can intensify some of these natural hazards. So I guess just the short answer is greenhouse gas emissions kind of falls more on like the air quality kind of category. But, you have some examples there in your question that I think can be expanded on and to be integrated perhaps into one of these plans. I don't know if that.
Yeah, and I think I can add on to that a little bit. There is a Sonoma County Climate Action Plan in place. The CEQA documentation for that was at the county level. The Regional Climate Protection Agency was never certified, but most of us in communities use that for our climate goals when we're looking at those things in terms of reduction of greenhouse gas and protection against future, not so much mitigating from existing hazards that might occur, but trying to reduce the potential for additional climate change and whatnot. That's not exactly in line with what the goal of this process is, but there are a number of things that have come up recently in terms of grants for climate, I'll call it emergency response. Like there was a grant recently from the state of California for communities affected by PSPSs. This was right after the evacuation, and we applied for it for ways to get backup power. And well, they're actually those grants, and increasingly I'm seeing that those grants actually want sustainable decisions. So if you're doing something more like, were we to add battery backup to the solar on all of our city buildings, that would be a much more sustainable route to take than an emergency generator. It's a lot more expensive, so it's not something the city could just go out and do, but it is one of those steps that the city can do along with our solar initiatives and all of that to help look at ways of lessening climate change into the future.
Okay. And then the other speaker, and I know you touched already on evacuees. Sherry also mentioned hazardous, I think like hazardous materials coming through our town. I don't know if you want to have any comments on that, Juliana or Carrie.
I think it's a good thing to add to our list to look at. I think in particular, there's the potential for water contamination, either from local businesses or from transportation hazards. I certainly have seen that as a potential before. We don't, unlike some communities, we don't have rail tracks, which is often, you don't know what's in the cargo, right? And it becomes a much higher level. I think Juliana showed a slide that, there's a myriad of potential natural hazards or man-made hazards that will look at one of the and you could say, hey, we want to respond to everything. Well, the reality is we don't have the time, money, or ability to respond to everything. So one of the things that this process does is it looks at what's the likelihood, what's the frequency, how many people and properties would be impacted. So, flooding, there's this pretty known percentage that we will be mapping and say, yeah, it's, is it 10% of city properties that are impacted by flooding, or is it, earthquake is 100% of the town is likely to be impacted because it's a major earthquake hits. So that's part of the assessment that we'll be going through and bringing back to you as part of this process.
And are part of those hazards crossover? Like there's certain things you can do for earthquake that also applies to other hazards and et cetera?
That's a good question, Juliana. I'll let you.
Yes, we call them multi-objective, hazard mitigation actions. So, there's obviously criteria that we'll look at, and some of those actions are typically get, prioritized more highly by staff. So once we come up with a list of, actions, there's various, outreach techniques and, maybe even structural or property protection projects that may meet various criteria to reduce, climate change effects, sea level rise, flooding. And then, some of the evacuation techniques or projects may apply to events that related to hazard material releases, which, you just brought up, as well as earthquakes. The evacuation procedures and planning processes may be similar or maybe slightly modified, but so the answer is yes, we just call those multi-hazard actions. And so when we organize everything in the beginning, there's a part in an executive summary of the plan where we can organize hazards by priority level, like high, medium, low, or by hazard type. So some, clients or cities and counties like to see it by hazard type, and then those types of hazards get categories in multi-hazard objectives or projects.
Okay, thank you.
Right, and one thing which I know has come up in a number of conversations is the, I'll just say somewhat disastrous evacuation we all experienced last year with the roadways and things like that. That is certainly something that's on our mind. And I know Bill and his fire group, and maybe you could say a couple of words, Bill, have been working on, certainly there were lessons learned from that and working on some ways to make sure that it's more orderly in the future.
Yeah, so I'm currently working with the Sheriff's Department and the county. What we're going to do for the city of Sebastopol, because it was just so frustrating during the Kincaid fire, and then at 3:30 in the morning on a Sunday morning, I get a phone call to say that we need to evacuate the entire city. Even today, I still struggle with that phone call. It was unbelievable. But what's missing in this city, and it's being dealt with now and will be a part of our emergency plan, evacuation. We're going to have grids set up and zones. We're using our 2 state highways to split the city. So we have Highway 12 coming in, and then Highway 116, kind of running that north-south, if you want to look at it that way, and Highway 12 coming in through Sebastopol and heading west. So we're going to use the 2 state highways to start off with creating 4 zones, Zone A, B, C, and D. We're working on the details now, but then we're going to break them into subzones. And because one of the biggest complaints that I had received when we opened up our emergency operations center here at the firehouse were hundreds of people calling and saying, hey, I got this map from the county. What zone are we in Sebastopol? Here's my address. What zone are we in? And unfortunately, we were a part of within the county of Sonoma, a city, and quite a few cities did not have a breakout. They just did Windsor as a city. They just completed Sonoma just a year ago. Santa Rosa's been in pretty good shape because they bump up against all the county buildings. But our city never really had a good map, a good zone map. So that's on the top of our list to make sure that happens. I wanted it to happen before the end of this fire season. but that's not going to happen. But we're hoping that the end is near with our fire season. And so that's a huge one, and that will be a part of the city's emergency plan to develop and to distribute evacuation zones. So everyone in the city, all 8,000 residents, will understand if they receive a call via social media, Nixle, however they're receiving emergency calls, that they will understand what zone they live in and when it's time from a warning to mandatory evacuation. So that's being worked on, and we're well overdue on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. And we do have one question that I think, Bill, you can also probably answer, because I know you're working on these, from Tor. Will the plan include details about improving communications during times of disaster? For example, installing a radio tower in town that is powered by solar and battery or could reach residents through radio, or improving cell tower network power supplies. And I'll start with that last part, the cell towers in town. Most of you may know that when we did lose power, if you had Verizon, you were okay, I believe. I don't know about other cells, but there is a Verizon cell tower at City Hall, which is also has a backup generator, and that ran through the entire week-long power outage we had last fall. Nicely, it also supplies City Hall, so we can continue operations there, and our city facilities generally have generators. The police, fire, and public works. The state also did pass legislation which goes into effect January 1st, which will start to require backup power to cell towers. They won't need to do it retroactively, but if they come in to apply for additional things, then that's something we can require them to do. And Bill, do you want to talk about emergency communications a little bit?
Yeah, I'll add a couple of comments, and then Skip, if you're still on the line, maybe you could share the work that's being done by Stan and the communications group and what we've been doing lately with testing and stuff. But I do sit with a county team. It's called Alert and Warning. So we're truly not just looking at Sebastopol, but we're looking at Sonoma County wide. And we truly do need to improve how we communicate and how we alert and how we warn people. And I mean, there's been a lot of ideas thrown out. Air raid sirens mounted, everywhere in the county. I'm not sure if that's going to go through or not. It's just an idea that's been floated. Enhancing our current cell towers that we use for public safety, for law enforcement, fire, enhancing those cell sites and make sure that they're protected from fire. We did lose one tower during the Kincaid fire, and so we're looking at all that, and then more closely with Sebastopol. Skip, if you don't mind just doing a quick update on Stan and our radio group.
Yeah, I'd be glad to, actually. Marion mentioned the Sebastopol Neighborhood Communications Unit, and it's a group of people that have actually been working for maybe a year and a half or so very closely to create a ham radio network that would have, at the upper level would be our ham group, and then below that at our neighborhood level, taking advantage of our Map Your Neighborhood program that we have, that individual neighborhoods would use FRS radios or walkie-talkies, and then be able to connect to a hub in their local area in one of the 4 areas that Bill is talking about, in the way that the city would be broken up into 4 quadrants. We'll have a hub in each of those quadrants that then that area would communicate to the hub. And then we have, at the fire department, we have a ham radio outfit there that would be a net control area that they would then be able to share information back and forth across the neighborhood. So it's been really great, their process that they're going through. I think they started out with 4 or 5 pretty much diehard people. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they have somewhere in the high teens of number of people that actually have ham radio licenses now. So, and there's more and more neighborhoods adopting FRS. So that would be a potential backup communication source within Sonoma County. And we've had other communities come and watch what they're doing when they've done some of their testing, to think that maybe it's something that they could do in their communities also when those cell towers do go down. So it's been a great effort on the part of the Sebastopol Neighborhood Communications Unit.
Good. Thanks, Skip. And then just one final note. We do have a emergency generator here at the firehouse. Dante at Public Works was able to purchase one recently. The police department has a backup generator. City Hall has the backup generator, or at least it does to the tower, right, Carrie? But maybe not.
Yeah, and actually, we have we do actually, it does feed a number of outlets in City Hall. So during that power outage, we were able to function.
Yeah, good. So I think, emergency generator wise, we're in fairly good shape, and we're getting in better shape while we purchase more. And so that part definitely plays into the emergency plan, and it's a piece of mitigation plan also. So once again, it all ties together. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Great, thank you for that.
Juliana, it sounded like you had the poll results. Unless there are any other questions, but
I'm going to share my screen really quick, and just thought I could close with, revisiting that poll. We got 23 folks on the line this evening to participate, which is really great. That's a lot for just this call. And so let me know when you can see my slide. I just shared it with you, Carrie.
Sorry, we can see it.
Okay, so I'll just say them out loud too in case you can't see this, but the top were, let's see, earthquakes, hazards, followed by drought and water shortages, energy shortages, and resiliency. So the PSPS, flooding. I'm going to scroll through it here. Climate change is at 48%. Pandemic, epidemic, followed by high winds, hazard material releases, agricultural pests, extreme heat, aquatic invasive species, tree mortality, and oil spills, natural gas pipeline hazards. Sometimes that one is actually integrated with hazard material releases, and then beyond there, it's just some that were not picked as the top 5. So that's great. I just want to really say thanks. That's a good turnout. I'm glad. Hopefully that was interesting and fun to do. It does help us just kind of, I hope we can kind of take this and compare it to what the input was last week from the committee, and really just make sure that if we don't, integrate these hazards, as standalone hazard profiles in the risk assessment, that we will, sometimes some of them are addressed as secondary hazards. An example there would be the power shutoffs, which may be, a result of a wildfire or a high wind event. And so that's another place we sometimes can discuss that hazard profile in the risk assessment. But we'll do our best to make sure that, again, all the natural hazards are covered, and, we'll have to kind of decide as a team which of the others that are not required under FEMA that we should address in this plan. So
thanks. And Juliana, Skip is asking if we can keep the poll open since he has sent it to his CERT group and Map Your Neighborhood folks to just see what the final results are.
I think you can still go on it, because sometimes when we first started doing these, we would just send them out at the end of meetings. So, you know what I mean? And versus how we did it last week, I just started thinking it was something interesting to integrate into the meeting, since we're all like virtually, we used to do all this on sticky notes. So yeah,
So why don't we try to keep it open?
I'll
for,
keep
say-
it open. I was able to just change it before the call tonight, so it's fine.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
And so that is it for this item. Thank you everyone so much for attending, and we will be coming back, as we said, with more information, but let's turn it back up to the chair.
Okay. We'll go on to Planning Director's report. And I'm really low on power, so I'm trying to conserve. That's why you don't see my name.
Can I ask a question on the mitigation?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I have one other question that just kind of, as we were talking, it came to me. And I know this is sort of probably addressed as different pieces of different kind of crises or hazards, but I'm wondering, is there anything or a reason to have like, you know, what if there's like a major economic downturn just on its own that's not triggered by some other event that impacts the city's ability to carry out its functions? You know what I mean? Like, is that ever anything that's ever considered or, you know, worth talking?
You know, I'll let Juliana answer, but from what I have seen, you know, this is a FEMA and emergency response plan.
Mm-hmm.
So like Stockton going bankrupt kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Doesn't get dealt with. You don't get bailed out by FEMA, and you don't get funding from FEMA or Cal OES for that kind of emergency. So while there's certainly reasons to plan for it, it's not part of this particular type of plan.
Got it. Thanks.
Go ahead, Luke.
Thank you. I was just going to ask if there was anything in terms of the communication plan to do with social media. I didn't hear anything about that, but can definitely be useful for anyone who doesn't have a hand crank radio, but does have a cell phone that's charged.
Are you talking about as we're going through this process outreach, or are you talking about communications in the event of an emergency?
Communications in the event of an emergency.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Bill if he can talk to that, but I can say that, you know, for those who have access to the internet, we certainly, the city does maintain a Facebook page, and we certainly have during any of the events banners and flyers and updates on our city website. Bill, can you add to that?
Well, no, I mean, you're right. The websites and all the social medias, but Luke, I understand your concern, because there is a percentage of our population out there that doesn't have access, doesn't receive Nixle, and so that is an area that we still need to address. We have to reach. I want to reach 100% of our community. I'm not sure yet how to go about that, but we need to do that. And at the minimum, you know, I mentioned an air raid siren. You know, that's pretty extreme of a means of communication, but it's something that the county is looking at, possibly putting up sirens throughout Sonoma County. We here in Sebastopol outfitted all of our emergency vehicles, police and fire, with the high-low siren. So for some, they'll understand that if they hear us coming through their neighborhood with this very bizarre sounding high-low siren, for some, they'll know that that means they need to evacuate immediately. And for others, you know, we just have to improve how we're going to educate everyone in our city and everyone in our community, because there may be you know, visitors coming through Sonoma County, and a high-low siren goes off or an air raid siren goes off, and they won't know what to do. They don't understand what that is. So that's a huge piece that I am working with the county on, because a lot of it will come from the county, but then I want to make sure that we enhance that, or at least reinforce that for the city of Sebastopol, to make sure that communications is just right up on top of the list. And that's a goal of mine, to build that into our emergency plan. But that's a good question. Thanks, Luke.
Thank you, Chief Brown.
Any other questions?
I do.
Looks like Skip wants to follow up.
Yeah, actually, it's not a question. Thank you. Is that all right for me to follow up a little bit?
Sure, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Through simple exploration, I found out just recently that the city has the capabilities to send out to a very broad area through Nextdoor. So as one of the platforms that's available, and I think we have to do multiple, this is a multiple level effort in order to be able to do it. There's a way to be able to reach out through Nextdoor from the city to be able to do essentially a broadcast, if you will, which I had not known about before. And I don't know whether it's actually ever been thought about to use it or not, but it's that kind of thing that I think allows us to know. We have a lot of exploring on that social media, in the social media realm, to be able to learn how we can reach out more, because it is going to take multiple approaches to get that 100% that Bill's talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'm sorry, just one question, and maybe Carrie, it's for you. So Everett, I think I heard that you guys were ready to move on to following your agenda. So is this a good cutoff time for Juliana, myself, and are we done with our mitigation review? I
believe we're just finishing up, Bill. Yeah, I think I don't see any final questions, so I think we're good.
Thank you to all of you. I really appreciate it.
Sorry, it sounds like Kate might have a question.
Okay.
Yeah, I just have one question, just following up on the outreach question, which I think is important. I was wondering if you, or maybe this is for Skip, if you have programs that involve high school students, because I think this would be an area where high school students would really benefit from becoming involved in their community at a very ground level and learning more about how cities functions in states of emergency and how groups work together during an emergency situation.
Yeah, that's great. Coincidentally, I've just been working with a young lady trying to get some real exploration of what the possibilities are for her to be able to help us, because we are trying to get to the younger crowd of people to be able to bring this message, to more normalize the message of being prepared, and then trying to get them to assist us, because they're so much better at being able to deal with some of these especially the social media. But I had gone to the schools a couple of years ago when Bill and I first started working together on this phase of the project anyway. And there wasn't a reason for high school students really to want to volunteer with us, because there wasn't a whole lot going on at the college level for emergency management kinds of courses or credentialing in some way. Now there is more. So I think there might be an opportunity for us to work with the high school to be able to develop some programs that they could assist us with what we're trying to do, and they could be learning at the same time some minimal level, or at least some piece of emergency management, that a letter from the city or a letter from the fire department would really add to their CV as they go on in their lives. So it's a great question. We're just touching into that.
Yeah, I think it's also just about community resiliency, right? It's not necessarily a question of a college degree. It's more about how do you exist with other people in a time of duress in order that it's mutually beneficial to move forward. So I think your group I lived in San Francisco for many years, and they have NERT, which is Neighborhood Emergency Response. And it's to help neighborhoods, work together during times of crisis, and it's all ages, right? It's about getting to know your neighbors. It's about things like what happens if there's a power line. It's very practical and direct. And I just think those skills are kind of life skills maybe at this point, given our unfortunate circumstances with climate change. that knowing about like, you know, how to turn off your gas is actually like a very important question. So I think it's interesting to explore it as a, you know, emergency management as a career, but just also going back to Marianne's point about community resiliency. But I'm very excited that you're already thinking about this and appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Linda Kelly here, question?
Go ahead.
Okay. So when we got evacuated last year, power was out. People were evacuating from the river. It was certainly real difficult to get across traffic. I'm an essential medical personnel at Memorial Hospital, and I also volunteer for the Red Cross down at the evacuation centers. And I found that when I came back, I did come back and sneak behind the lines to be able to get a change of uniforms and to just check on things. And what I'm wondering is, I don't know, I know it was a difficult time and we didn't have a lot of personnel, but it seemed that there was nobody really watching our vacated neighborhoods very much. And I'm wondering, and we were very fortunate that we didn't have any property or looting as much as I can tell from talking to staff. But I'm wondering if that can somehow be included as a very important thing for us to, you know, figure out ahead of time. And I know it's very difficult because it was a big deal that was happening and there probably wasn't any resources. But once we were evacuated, I certainly would love to have, you know, more police or the sheriff or surveillance of our personal properties. So that's one question, observation. And the second one is, we have homebound, invalid folks living, and then we have our senior center, you know, our senior housing, all of which, you know, I think there should be a coordinated effort to make sure that the plans are in place with those institutions to get the heck out of Dodge in an effective manner. The last fire we had, the glass fire, I was coming home from Memorial at about 2 in the morning when it started and saw the backup of the traffic of the buses trying to evacuate, you know, the senior facilities. And this time it worked out really well. The time before, when I was working 3 years ago at the Veterans and the, you know, the fairgrounds, what would happen is the staff of those facilities sometimes just dropped the folks off and left. And the Red Cross really at first is not set up to have to deal with, you know, bed-bound patients who need care. Now, some facilities, their caregivers stayed with them. But, you know, these are sort of the practical issues that I observed working out there on the front lines. So, thank you.
Can I make a comment about that? I don't know if Bill might want to comment about the police, local police and sheriffs being in town. But I know that Marianne had mentioned the Gravenstein Health Action Coalition, and they have been supporting the Map Your Neighborhood program, especially the Leader Council, with an effort to be able to focus on the Map Your Neighborhood groups connecting with isolated seniors and those people that are the more vulnerable within the neighborhood. So there is an effort afoot to be able to have the neighborhoods be that connection for the most vulnerable, or for, again, for the seniors. And we are connected with the senior center in order to be able to share our information back and forth about what's going on. But the Health Action Coalition very much has a focus on isolated seniors and our ability to approach that from the neighborhood level, rather than them trying to find those individual seniors and pay attention to those individual seniors from one particular place. We're attempting to get to where we are paying attention to them from within their immediate neighborhood through the Map Your Neighborhood program.
Right. Okay. Any other final questions? Linda?
Well, I was wondering if our fire chief could maybe address a little bit about how is the neighborhoods being surveilled in terms of safety.
Linda, you want to repeat that question again for me, please?
Well, when we've evacuated, and I know staff was very impacted, but you know, who's watching our homes while we're gone? I didn't really see anybody doing that.
I'll be honest. Initially, no one was. Then we received mutual aid and auto aid from other police agencies and jurisdictions. We were receiving police officers from East Bay, Bay Area. We pretty much, police department pretty much put out an all call. And so you probably didn't witness it, but we had out of county officers come, and we positioned them in the gridlock areas of trying to get out of Sebastopol. And that was, of course, that was a problem in itself, that it was total chaos and gridlock. And it took anywhere between 4 to 6 hours in some areas just to evacuate out of Sebastopol. But what we did was when we started receiving mutual aid police, we would assign them to the main intersections to help direct traffic. And then that freed up our own Sebastopol police officers, and all off-duty officers were called back into work, staffed up, and then started patrolling. Now, I cannot tell you that they patrolled every street in every neighborhood. Probably unrealistic, but they obviously started with the main core of the city and then started working their way through the residential areas. So once we received the mutual aid, they were able to get out and start patrolling. But there's that window where there's no patrol going on. We're trying to evacuate thousands of people in vehicles that were just gridlocked, stopped traffic right out here in front of the firehouse. And it was tough. Those first few hours was really tough. But once we started getting the resources in, then we were able to get out into our community and start to protect our community. But that is on the list with the police department. That falls on their shoulders, and they have made an offer for a new police chief. Not sure when he's going to start, but we're going to get a new police chief, and I'm pretty sure he's going to be involved with evacuations and sheltering and patrolling, everything that we learned during these last few citywide emergencies and some of our own failures. That'll be on top of his list. I can guarantee you that.
Thank you for the info.
You're welcome, Linda.
And Everett, you're muted.
Thank you. Any last questions? Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay.
So
well,
Juliana, Skip, and Bill, I think, thank you
Yeah.
very much for joining us.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you
thank
again.
you. Have a good evening. Bye.
Okay, planning director's report.
All right, and I will make this pretty brief. There aren't a lot of huge updates, but I think the big update, and I can't recall if we've got a lot of committees going on right now, so I'm not sure I've updated this group. But the city did receive a permit from Caltrans to do parklets, up to 4 parklets in town. And I want to thank Commissioner Fritz especially. And I know when I shared this news at our DRB, Commissioner Lambert or Board Member Lambert there called you out as well as one of the key folks helping to get that project rolling. And so I want to extend a great gratitude to Vice Chair Fritz on that. The materials for those have been ordered and they will be being installed in probably 2 to 3 weeks. We also have had a lot of long meetings with council to look at revised budgets. We do now have an adopted revised budget as well as a revised capital improvement plan that has been adopted, so the final budgets for the year. We do anticipate there'll be likely in January, a mid-year budget adjustment just to be able to, that's a normal thing for the city, but this sort of interim budget and now the final is new, and for obvious reasons, the council is taking a really close look at the financing. The park projects were not affected by those discussions, although obviously some of the maintenance items that Dante discussed in the special meeting earlier was certainly something that he and I are both working on and tracking the measure on other funding for the city. And I think that's it for my updates, unless there are any questions.
Do you know when I saw that the Climate Action Subcommittee had some appointments made.
Yes, thank you. The council did complete their interviews and they did appoint the members to that committee. We will be, and Commissioner Lindenbush, you are the liaison or the committee member from the Planning Commission. We are working on scheduling that meeting. The city council actually still needs to appoint their own committee member, which we want to get that person on board as part of the leadership for that group before we start. And they did continue that until their first meeting in December, which is when they normally review committee assignments for all committees for the council. And also there may be a different council, and so they felt like it's basically one meeting away, and so they did want to delay doing that until then. So I would anticipate a meeting would probably be either mid-December or early January.
Thank you.
And anyone else? Okay.
All right, thank you.
If there is nothing further, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Yes.